Thank you.
Good morning. It's Sunday, August 18th. Welcome to the meeting of the Northport Village Corporation Board of Overseers. I'm John Spritz, the president, and our first item of business is to approve minutes from the July 14th and July 28th, which was an emergency meeting of the Board of Overseers. I think that the July 14th minutes in rough draft have just been circulated, am I correct? They're around the table, I don't have them, I don't care. The July 28th minutes, are they with those?
No, I didn't.
That's a one-pager that,
Okay. That, you can have this. This is the red line copy.
oh, I don't need, I trust them all. I think I circulated to you guys earlier the minutes from the emergency meeting. You'd seen those before. There were two edits on that. Do I have a motion to approve this rough draft, or would you like to see another final draft?
Is this the minutes?
This is the minutes from the 14th.
The
and
14th.
I would move to approve. They look
Well,
like
can I
they're...
just make a correction and use mine one?
Wait, can we have a motion first to approve?
So, yes, and then...
Second. Judy, and seconded. Okay, go ahead.
Just a small item. I was only kidding when I said gave away 400 plus hot dogs.
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
I believe it. I thought it was right also. I assumed that was the case.
I want that to be misinterpreted. Just give away hot dogs would be great.
You don't want to set the bar too high.
Around.
All right,
Next
for
thing you know, people
future
are gonna be
safety
complaining
days,
about
right?
that.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the July 14th minutes? All opposed? Abstaining?
I don't read that. I'm staying.
Abstaining, 6 in favor, 1 abstaining.
And then I would move the July 28th, if they were, I recall them being...
I circulated them after the meeting.
The emergency, the short meeting about the transition.
Oh, yeah.
That's moved,
Oh, that's what that, yeah.
that's moved by Judy, second. Second by Michael Terrell. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? That's unanimous, although I must look hard.
Abstain.
Oh, that's 6 in favor, 1 abstain. I'll sort of be talking through the agenda, pieces of it as we move along, because we've got 2 new overseers here, but we have created 2 opportunities. There are 2 opportunities in the agenda for meeting attendees to speak at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting, because we sometimes conduct business they may want to comment upon. So this is our first time for questions or issues from meeting attendees. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? And if so, please identify yourself. Mr. Wilson.
John Woolsey, I'm speaking for Bayside Arts. There are 2 things that I want to talk about. The first one is that we had a board meeting of Bayside Arts, and we discussed various strategies for complying with your wish that the set go up and down before and after each presentation. We're going to do some experiments with that later in the month. I don't guarantee that we'll come up with anything that will work, but we're going to try. And we made the determination that it really had to be something that our volunteer hosts could do on the just prior to the performance, when they set up and take it down when they're sweeping the floor. Okay. The second issue is that according to our agreement, after the last performance, I came in the next day and took the set down. I stacked it on the side of the stage because we don't have a storage space here.
Let him finish.
Please,
I was just going to say that was noticeable, and it was awesome.
So I was a little bit surprised when I showed up for the annual meeting that it was nowhere to be seen. I came in the next day, I pulled the piano out, just slightly averting a hernia, I must say, and saw that the set had been stored underneath the stage. Can I ask who did that?
That was actually an arrangement with Jeffrey Wilton and his children, because there was no indication that anyone was going to take the set down before the annual meeting. There was discussion about this. We hadn't heard from Bayside Arts, and so...
Well, it was taken down.
Well,
It was taken
Jeff,
down, and there were, flats stored along the side of the stage where they've been all summer.
Bill, can you clarify this?
The one issue is you cannot have anything stored in that entryway leading to the fire exit door.
Okay.
That is illegal, anything.
But it can't,
Excuse me, but before the set was stored, I don't know why, nobody called me up and said, John, we're storing the set, can you please come down and look at it? It's a real lapse of communication.
Bill Cressy was in on that loop.
Bill, please.
He had an email from me stating that it was going to be done, and then by the time he got back to me, it had already been done.
Jeff?
so, at the last overseers meeting, where there was a fair amount of discussion about how to store the set, I simply said, I think there's an easy solution to this. We can find some instructors from the yacht club who, with the proper supervision, could do it and would be happy to do it. So you got in touch with me, and I grabbed my 2 sons and 2 other boys, and we watched them neatly stack them and put them under the stage.
Well, the fact is that I wasn't consulted. And
Go ahead.
It seems very fair that John should be included in any emails, even though Bill Cressy was copied. John is the president, so that was a lapse on our part.
Understood.
the end result was that it was stacked not in the proper order, and there's a good reason why it should be stacked up in a very certain way, because it's delicate. It's made primarily out of fabric, not, the stackers then piled a lot of things on top of the set. Wood, boxes full of heavy things. Some of the flats are damaged. I'm not sure by how much, but I won't know until we can take them out and I can create a proper dolly, which is what I was going to do when my family leaves the week after next, so that it can be stored properly and gotten in and out by people such as myself. I'm really upset that we have this set that we worked very hard to make, and that was funded by a grant, and now it's damaged.
First Mr. Wilk, then Mr. Leonard.
Okay, so at the last overseers meeting, you stood exactly where you are now and said you could not do it. Because...
But I can supervise.
Oh, so, right, and I wish you had been
Perfectly
there,
capable.
but I would, I found 4 young men who said, I'm happy to help. Bill and I watched them do it. They hardly manhandled the stuff. They neatly stacked it. I don't recall them stacking stuff on top of it. I remember them just pushing it in and then pushing the piano over.
And
So they will not make that mistake again.
Mr. Leonard?
Bill Page and Bill Cressy and I met at the beginning of the season upstairs, and we talked about how things could be retrofitted so they could easily be moved and stored, and we were talking about coming up with a plan for this season, and that didn't go anywhere. So, I mean, I gotta be honest, I'm really surprised that you're here basically complaining about people helping out, because I thought you were gonna stand up and say, oh, everything was great because you came in, because they came in and helped you move the things, and that next night at the yacht club thing, it was wide open and it looked great. And I thought that's what this was. I thought this was gonna be a happy little discussion, honestly. So I'm a little surprised by that, and I think we're very willing to come up with a long-term plan, but until that plan occurs, I don't think it's fair for you to come in and to talk to him and his sons and stuff about what they did, because they were just doing what we had talked about doing, so.
But nobody contacted me.
As has been indicated, that was an oversight. We'll take care of it in the future.
Okay?
Bill Page?
I have been told previously by Bill Cressy to contact him. He's the one, so I assume he is the one that was in charge of that stuff. So that's why he was only contacted, because that's what he has told me in the past.
I saw him at our board meeting on
I never
Friday.
know.
That's your issue, Vicki.
What I'm hearing is a lack of communication, which isn't unusual when many people are involved. I, again, want to say that I think the Arts Committee has done an amazing job of utilizing this. I understand people that don't want your things there. My suggestion would be assess the damage. If there's something we can help you with, I think it would be considered. If you want to do that.
That would be appreciated, thank you.
I can't speak for everybody, but I can say, let us know and we'll consider it.
Thank you.
All right?
Okay.
By the way, this was an incredible season for Bayside Arts. Everything we're talking about is on the fringe of the reality, which is that
Yeah.
every single performance was extraordinary and appreciated by the people who were there. So thank you and your organization for utilizing that space in ways that has not been utilized in years past.
Thank you. I probably will need help getting the set out from under the stage so that we can put it on a proper dolly. And there are some modifications that need to be made under the stage in order to make that possible. I would seek authorization to be able to do some discrete cuts and so forth to be able to do that, okay?
Yeah,
Mr. Lannon?
yeah, we talked about that. And Mel and I were talking about with Bill at the beginning of the season, and we're ready to help in any way we can with that. Because I would like to echo what John's saying about Bayside Arts in general. I mean, there was one Sunday night I was so bummed I missed, because everybody I talked to was like, that was the best thing ever. So, I mean, I think we want to help in any way, but we just have multiple uses for it, and we just need to honor them all.
Okay. Again, I'm sorry to keep harping, but I was not included in the loop on anything with regard to the storage space under the stage. Nothing.
Bill Cressy was.
Bill Cressy was, but I really would like emails to come to me as well, so that I know what's going on in my
No,
organization.
so noted.
That
CC.
seems reasonable.
I think so too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Anybody else like to address? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the report of the president. There are a few items I'm going to go through, more than usual, and that's because we have two new overseers here, and in my mind, this is the beginning of the annual cycle for overseers meetings. We didn't always have an August meeting. We went from a July meeting to the village annual meeting to an overseer September meeting, so it was a 2-month span in there, and a couple of years ago, I think I suggested that with some other people, it felt like it was a long time to go without a meeting in the heart of the summer when there were so many issues at play. So we instituted this August meeting immediately following the annual meeting. That's why we have it now. I appreciate everybody getting out of bed early this morning to come here when it's raining at 5 p.m. It is. A few issues I do want to go over. I just want to explain to and perhaps if people are watching, we have Ned Leitner who now videos these and they're put up online, these meetings. Just so you know, this corporation was founded in 1915 as one of several, at the time, incorporated villages throughout the state of Maine. So we just had our centenary a few years ago. And we are governed by a charter which was passed by the Maine State Legislature, which is somewhat iron-bound and lays out the broad parameters for the corporation and people around this table, but more specifically by bylaws, which can be changed at annual meetings and were most recently changed, if not last year, then the year before, but relatively recently. So there are bylaws that say how many committees there are and how we interact among one another. We will get you copies of these and all the other pertinent documents, so you'll have a nice 3-ring binder to look at. I apologize for not having them right now, but the most important thing to know is that there are 7 overseers around the table, and you are the ones who make policy for the village. I'm the president. I call the meetings and officiate the meetings, but I don't have a vote. The treasurer, Mr. Castellanos, that provides us with extraordinary counsel, does not have a vote. Bill Page, our village agent, who is the man who makes all the cogs and gears go in this place, does not have a vote. And Mandy, who is our office manager, does not have a vote. It's the 7 of you who determine issues. And those are determined by motions, seconding motions, having discussion, and then voting on those motions. Not everything happens that way. Sometimes there's more loosey-goosey stuff around the edges, but in general, we like to have things processed through motions, just so you understand how that works. And we always ask, understandably, that meetings and people move as efficiently as possible, that you not necessarily reiterate what somebody has already expressed, and that you express what you're trying to do as concisely as possible, which I'm not doing right now.
You might be going to mention that. Could you mention the need for a quorum?
Yes, and we need a quorum of 4 overseers to have a meeting, present here in this room. So if you have a question that, well, geez, I'd like to call in by phone, that we can accommodate that, but you would not be voting in the meeting and would not be part of the quorum.
They can vote. They're
They
not
can vote,
counted
okay.
to the quorum.
They're not counted the quorum. So 4 people have to be live bodies in this room. And we did have it once this past
Just once, yeah.
year,
Once in my
when we
career.
could only find 3 overseers. And we worked very hard, and I understand all of the issues surrounding your personal lives. But we ask as much as possible that you try to be here. And that you try to be here on time, which means after this meeting, there'll be one more 8 a.m. meeting. We do June, July, August, September at 8 o'clock. And then we start 9 o'clock in October. This was instituted because the theory was that if we got in here earlier, we'd get out of here earlier, and you get to enjoy your Sunday in the summer more. That isn't always necessarily the case. Yeah. But that's the theory. We're working on that theory. I'm going to also, we have a village directory which lists the addresses and contact information for the officers, board of overseers, and staff. There are 2 people who need to add information to it, and those are our new overseers, Lisa Pryor and Miles Frieden. And I'm going to pass this around. If you could just fill in. This is not made public. This is kept in the office and circulated among the officers and overseers and staff. But it's a document that helps us, just in case, like Wednesday in November, I'm trying to reach you. Judy.
I'd be happy to get the charter, the bylaws, and the existing versions of all ordinances to Miles and Laura when I'm back in the office.
Thank you very much.
Um,
Lisa.
And Lisa, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Mike, you had mentioned the other day that you didn't think you had such things, and so if you feel, I'm going to send everything to you as well. Mike, okay, then I'm just going to send out a new bundle for everyone.
Okay.
That'd be-
Yeah, Mike mentioned that he had a binder, but I don't know. You had sent me a few things initially too, so I did have stuff. I said I never got the binder.
But everybody's going to get a new groupie set.
Yeah, that's great.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And so they're supposed to put them in their own binder, or what do you?
Well, then what I'll do is in September, I'll bring
Bring my design
binders.
Okay.
We'll make binders, new binders. Also, I sent around to all of the overseers a list of the committees and the chairs as best I knew them at the time. And I did have Bill and John on the infrastructure committee, not utilities. That's right.
Bill,
Your email to me was
wait, Bill.
Bill Haverty and John Wojcik are indeed on the infrastructure.
Oh, great, okay,
Utilities.
great, thank you.
So we'll have to go over this because there certainly are people who are not showing up on this list, and the chairs may say, well, I'd like to restructure this. So what I'd like is for the, between now and September, for all of the chair committees to just get back to me with a complete version of who is on their committee and any recommendations they have. Our new overseers, you will have committee responsibilities besides being overseers, and I'll look to the current chairs to make suggestions in that regard. Mike?
With regard to the utility committee, were you going to mention this?
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
required to have 3 overseers on the utility committee. There are currently only 2, Mike Lannon and Judy Metcalf. So right away, we know that another overseer is going to need to show up on that committee. Yes.
I just need for clear, now, each committee, an overseer needs to be the chair of each committee? Is that right?
Yes.
Is that a-
That's the only thing. And beyond that, you can have
Except not.
as many overseers?
as many overseers.
as one of
The
the
exception
other
is the utilities committee, which requires 3 overseers. Okey-doke. So I'll ask for people to get back to me, and I'll remind you again early September-ish on that one. departments, committees. This is something that a personal bugaboo of mine, which is that I request that overseers, when talking about people or houses in the village, try to be as clear whom they're referring to as possible, because we have new people around the table who may not know when you say, oh, it's Bobby's house over there, what that means. So it'd be helpful to say, it's Bobby Schwartz, and he lives at the corner of blank and blank. Sometimes we even go back and we point to this big map behind us, but it helps. And I am still often confused when someone refers to, Dorothy, who used to live over where Fred used to live. I have no idea what that means. Just send a letter to them, please.
Or your cottages, Schmidtburgers.
I'm Schmidtburgers forever. Our cottage will be Schmidtburgers. We have no choice about that. All right, I'm moving along. Now, email protocol. I don't think I sent this email out to everybody. We have had, every organization like this has issues with email protocol. What is the difference between being at this meeting and what you say and when you're out in the world on the internet? A group of 3 overseers constitutes a meeting. If Mike Lanham runs into Mike Terrell on the street and they start talking, that's fine. If Lisa joins them and they start chatting about, geez, the changes and improvements they'd like to make to the pier, that constitutes a meeting. So think about that as you're gathering. That doesn't mean we can't go to Steve Kaz's porch and have a nice time when he has a party and all that. But when you actually sit and conduct overseer's business, NBC business, that constitutes a meeting if there are 3 or more of you. Now, as far as email use goes, I'm just going to hand this out. It's all written here. Some of you have seen it before. I've clarified it again, brought it up to date a little bit. But essentially, email is to be used only to convey information and not to opine and discuss issues. That when the email goes out, if you're sending one or if you're responding to one, it is only because you are sending out information or you are, that's really all. You don't need to say, well, that's a wonderful document, John, and now let me tell you what I think we should really do. Because that becomes discursive and it's not what the point of email is. And you need to keep it that level. If you feel that email has gone out and or there is an issue between meetings that rises to the occasion of it has to be discussed right now, then contact me and we can schedule an emergency meeting. We've had 2 or 3 this past year because there were issues coming up that the overseers had to vote on before we could get to our next monthly meeting. The calendars were happening out there in the wide world and we were having to respond to them on the spot, which is why we need to have an emergency meeting. It wasn't because, gee, it would be nice to discuss this very quickly. It was because we had to respond to something. One was about a transmission, one was about a law that was coming out of the state, an issue arising in front of us. So, read that on your own.
Can I just supplement
Please.
that? There's 2 components of email, and John has just said very well how it can descend very quickly into a meeting, which would be illegal. The other is that every email is a communication that is subject to our public policy of producing our documents. So if you don't want your words out there available to everyone, speak as though everyone is hearing what you're saying, and don't be intemperate. And everything needs to be copied to nbcmain@gmail.com, because that's the repository. So don't send just Mike an email if you want to just ask Mike a question. Copy it to nbcmain@gmail.com. That is the central place for all the communications.
So typically when I send out emails, they go to the 7 of you. Often, usually these people are involved, and nbcmain@gmail.com, because, and you'll start to see that, it'll be very easy just to reply to all of them. My last item is...
John, can I just?
Please.
I think for my purposes, just for clarification, because we've discussed this, it's safe to update folk about something going on. And that is necessary and important. And I think that the standard approach to making sure that everyone gets that this is an update and we're not having a meeting is to say at the end, this information is provided as information, no need for dialogue.
Thank you.
And it just reminds us all that we're not having a debate here, this is just somebody sharing, what happened in a meeting.
Right.
Or what we're going to talk about on Sunday.
Exactly. There's frequently documents we have to send out before the next meeting, and we say, this is just information for next meeting, no need to comment on it. My last item is the proposed meetings for 2019-2020, and I've already been corrected, because as much as the calendar that I was looking at didn't have Easter on it, it didn't have a little red Sunday, it had a black Sunday or whatever. It must have been a calendar that came out of the non-Judeo-Christian world.
It's the politically correct calendar.
And so I blew that one. But other than April 12th, I can pass these around now. Do people want new versions of them?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Because I stopped.
I feel like a teacher in school passing out the sheets. I like it.
I love it. There you are.
Thank you.
Yes.
And by the way, again, for the new overseers especially, there have been occasions when, even though we agree on a certain date, as it approaches, for a variety of reasons, sometimes in terms of a quorum, we say, you know what, we may have to do that one a little better. But in general, this is the schedule we try to adhere to. So, besides April 12th, and we can talk about that in a moment, are there any other dates on here which people have issue with?
Thank you.
Mr. Len?
I had sent you an email about a month ago to discuss the potential schedule, and in that email, what I had said was, this is not something that I thought up, but a lot of, nonprofits and a lot of the cities and towns that I work with, they establish a certain day of the month that the meetings are. And then based on that meeting day, they work backwards and they have deadlines throughout the month. And that actually allows the staff to, what's that?
Finish.
Yeah, okay. That allows the staff to essentially to set certain dates. So if we have it, say, the first Sunday of every month, then all the bills are due a certain day, so that whoever's working in the office then can process all those on that day, knowing that everything for that meeting is now cut off and everything else has to come forward. And actually, most of the vendors actually prefer that, because they know there's a certain day, I gotta get my bill in by that day, and then I get paid. Similarly, it makes it easier for the president and so on to say, then this is the day where all the items for the agenda need to be in, and then the agenda can go final and so on. So, and it's also easier for, I would think, for the villagers if we had sort of a common day, because everybody knows that it's the first Sunday of the month, and then whatever that day is that day. And so I would like to make a motion that we have it on the first Sunday of the month, unless there's a holiday, okay? And then we would have it the next Sunday. That would be my motion.
Is there a second to that motion?
We can discuss it.
Johnson.
Second by Jeffrey. Discussion, Mr. Cadlons?
So the wild card with us are warrants. We can't pay our bills without overseers signing the warrants.
Yes.
And the schedule you have in front of you incorporates the schedule when we get financials.
So this schedule, in fact, does ascribe to how we would pay
I
our
get what
bills.
you're saying,
It
but
does.
we just need to change that schedule, because we have problems with our accounting system now, so we just need to, any schedule can be adjusted to a new schedule, so we would set the schedule up so that it would work better with this. I don't particularly like these dates because a lot of them fall on holidays. Mother's Day, Father's Day, Columbus Day weekend, and people that aren't here now have to come here if they want to be included. So, I would prefer to see it be a non-holiday weekend when we have a meeting.
Just before I deal with Judy and then Steve, there is a logic on the Columbus Day weekend, which in fact a lot of people are here because that's when a lot of cottages close up. So that's intentional. As far as the Father's Day and Mother's Day, we've gone through this in years past. I'm happy to switch those. Some of it is, excuse me, that the billing becomes available at a certain time, and we'd like to meet as soon thereafter as possible. Judy?
Well, I'm doing what you told us not to, repeating what you just said. This is purposeful, to make our accounting as meaningful as possible. We want the month-end numbers. To get the month-end numbers, we need to give the bookkeepers the chance to prepare them at month-end, and Steve to have a chance to review them, which is why it's typically the second Sunday of the month, which is really tight sometimes. I want to echo Columbus Day. That's important. We've always tried to do these on the holiday weekends because we know people will be here. Mother's Day and Father's Day have been traditional for us, and I've taught my kids that that's the gift I'm giving them is the commitment to public service. But that's self-righteous.
Mr. Trevor?
Yeah, everything Judy said, plus a couple of other pieces. If we were to restructure finances to go to, say, the 21st of the month, that really is going to change the way we look at things, and I would not advocate we make that kind of a change. It just doesn't make sense to me. We have the ability to have the overseers vote to issue the following month's checks without their approval. But that runs counter to the intent of the charter and bylaws, so I would not recommend that either. And lastly, the point about our accounting is all messed up, I take exception to that. We're having some transition issues, which we've talked about before. The accounting was bulletproof for 3 years. We're struggling with some things now, but that is not a reason to change the way we approach this stuff.
Okay.
Ms. Lyon?
I apologize for saying that it's all messed up. That was a gross statement where I could have been a little more refined, okay? So it's not all messed up, but we're having some transition issues. And it seems to me that we could set it up however we wanted. And I'm not saying it has to be the first Sunday of the month. It could be any Sunday of the month that works. It should just be the same one. So that, because to me, we talked a lot this summer about trying not to overload the staff with things outside of their sort of normal things. And I almost see it sort of the other way around. If we can normalize some of the normal things more, then that can be more streamlined, so that then when things come up, because they always come up, there's a little bit more time. So I don't care about the first Sunday. And if we decide we want to have it on the holidays, that's fine. I would suggest we just pick some Sunday, and if you wanted to work with the financials, make it the third Sunday of every month. And then from there, it's just understood, and everybody knows it's that day, and then the bills can be done by the certain Friday or the certain Wednesday, and everything's normalized.
Steve?
And again, coming back to the warrants. So the current process is that any bill that is received in a calendar month by the first of the month is paid the following month. So the further we push out that Sunday, the more we delay payment to someone who has an invoice they submit to us on the 1st of June.
Yes.
That's now going to get paid at the end of July.
And that's okay.
That's, well, not by them.
Well, it's okay, because that's the way it is when you work with public entities. I mean, when I work with public agencies, there's a certain lag that's expected because people have to get together and have a meeting and approve it. So I think the other side of that is also true, which is if you know that this is the day you're going to get paid, you can plan accordingly. For our company, I'd much rather know that I'm going to get paid 2 weeks later, and it's always going to be that day, because that's the way to plan, as opposed to getting the check, this month real close, that month further. You don't really know what's happening, I think, and then they know, if I really wanted to get that thing in June 1st, then June 1st means that I miss it till the next cycle, so I'm going to get it on May 31st.
Okay,
So-
I get it, I understand. This is roughly the second Sunday of each month, so this already roughly hits what you're looking for?
No, it doesn't do it at all, because I'm trying to set it so that the timeline can be set by days of the month for the staff. So having it just.
Okay, Mr. Wilt?
So, to your point, it is roughly the second Sunday of the month with I think what will end up being 4 exceptions. November, February, March, and one would assume we're not meeting Easter Sunday, so April. What is the the logic behind, for example, in November, doing it the third Sunday instead of the second Sunday? Is
It had to do with the original set of when Steve was getting material, and we could, am I looking at a calendar, that we could move the November one up. It's tight. We get material November 8th from the accountants in November, and the meeting would be on the 10th. And I think you would express,
You might not have financials.
you might not have financials.
I just wanted to
The
understand
wish
why.
was to make sure that we had financials for a meeting. Judy?
Well, and to the double layer on that is that it's traditional for the utilities trustees to meet the Friday before the overseers meeting. We count on having our financials then as well, and so that pushes those financials up even tighter, and we really need to focus on those financials. We do pay attention to them. It pushes, you're trying very hard to assure that the balls roll up the hill in a meaningful, orderly way. And I think that this may not be perfect, but it's the one that works given our goal to have meaningful financials.
Judy? Vicki, sir?
Yeah, is there a motion on the floor?
There is a motion on the
I'd like to amend the motion to make it the third Sunday of the month, because then obviously all this stuff would work out and people would be paid on a timely basis, and we could set a schedule for the staff, and then I don't need any more discussion.
Is there a second to that motion?
Well, I would resist that in terms of Columbus Day, for instance.
Is there a second to that motion?
Oh, I would second it.
Jeffrey, is there discussion on the motion to move the agenda to the third Sunday of each month?
I'm not in favor.
All in favor?
Yeah, that's fine. I can be in favor by myself.
Opposed? Abstaining? That was 5 opposed, 1 abstaining. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about April.
We have approved this. Oh, April.
All right, I know,
Oh, okay.
April is an issue, and that's why I said,
April 19th works for me. That is also, that's Patriots Day weekend. And Mike, I know you always have the Concord.
April's bad no matter what, right?
But-
We need some
right.
papers that we
But
can. Is there a quorum around the table, I guess is what I should ask for
I'll be
April
here on
19th?
April 19th.
I will not be here on April 19th.
I could be here on April 19th.
Miles?
I probably would not be.
1, 2,
Probably will.
3. Michael?
That would be a meeting I joined by phone.
So 3.5 is what I'm hearing.
Me too. So,
You could move it earlier and just not have financials in April. Move it to the week earlier.
April what?
That would be the
5.
5th.
April 5.
Palm Sunday. Doesn't make a difference to me. It doesn't make a difference to me. I'm not pretending.
Okay.
How about April 5th?
April 5th.
I can be here April 5th.
I beg your pardon?
I believe I can. as well.
Okay, I think we should move Sunday, April to the 5th, with the working assumption now that we will not have financials. They can be made available by email to people subsequently, no?
Yes. they won't be ready.
Absolutely.
So, just they won't be available.
Right, by the 5th.
Okay? Any other changes?
I just,
Okay.
just, when do we switch from 9 o'clock to 8 o'clock?
In October.
So we start at 9, and then in the spring, when do we go to 8, May or June?
June.
June, okay.
There are 4 months, June, July, August, September, when we're at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Jeff?
I just to make sure we have a quorum, I know September 15th, I will have to join by phone because I have to be in
I will not be here September.
Richmond that day.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
I will be here.
Okay.
It sounds like we have a quorum. Thank you.
Can I, before you move on, can we address the phone situation and the call-in, the technology? Because, I mean, it doesn't, it's very difficult. Is there a way around, can we upgrade that call?
Yeah, the way around is buying new equipment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason you couldn't. I think you need to get somebody, I would not advocate we go pick out a piece of equipment. I bring somebody in who understands the acoustics. And then you've got to make sure you've got the money to do so. And right now, I don't have any idea what that cost would be. I'm guessing maybe a couple grand. So you have it in contingency today. You have contingency funds for that. And somebody has to choose to be the sponsor of that project.
Vicki?
it's not perfect, I'm not sure is anything else going to be any better. I've always been on the other end.
That is an old system.
Mhm.
It's probably 10 years old now. So, yeah, I think it's worth looking at it. John Woolsey looked very hard at it, and came up with a very expensive solution, when he participated by phone so much, because he has hearing issues, and it was really hard for him. So,
And we're unable, I believe, to take multiple calls at the same time on that system.
No,
You
you
can
can
do three.
do multiple.
You can
We can do multiples?
well, as long as it's conference from somebody
You do
else.
this is what we do on the Waterfront Safety Committee, we do that, there's a conference number.
Okay,
So
we use that number.
Yeah, we just use the conference number.
Peggy?
But we don't have a conference number, so what I would like to say is, because the tree committee had people coming in, and since I am not one of those people that has my own personal conference number for these things, we were scurrying around to find somebody whose conference number we could use. My question, in reviewing this and overlooking it, when we get to that, is include in there getting the village's own conference number that we all have access to.
Steve?
And then can we table this?
Zoom is free and does that.
But it's not.
Whoever knows those things, I know.
Mike
that
Lannon?
these
Yeah, you
things.
can just, the village can sign up for a free conference call.com.
Yeah, that's what.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we can move on, I'm sorry to introduce it because we have a big agenda, but the issue is it's not about the conference line.
Yeah.
That equalizes people
about the
talking
technology.
in, it's about people in the room,
Right.
hearing people in the room. So
Right.
let's move on, it's too much of an issue, we'll table it until.
Well, we'll find some way
Somebody to research it. Do you want to research it? Do you want to take?
No.
I will see if my IT people can research it for me. I'm not making a promise, but I will ask them.
Thank you.
They know I don't know technology. So.
Good. I want to say to the two new overseers that the president's report is usually a brief, under 90-second kind of report. So it's unusual that it's 8:45 and we're moving on to this part. I apologize. This is the beginning of the year and there's a lot of stuff to be
These
resolved.
are very important.
So have we voted yet on this proposed, do we need a motion to accept this or is this just?
Well, I don't know if we need one, but we did make a motion to accept it.
We did?
Yeah, well, Mike made a motion so
No,
we get the conversation going. And it was seconded.
No.
Mike's motion was on the
That was not,
Standardize it.
no, there's not a motion yet to
Oh,
accept
okay.
this.
I make a motion, we accept the agenda as amended, as we have amended the dates.
You mean the schedule?
The schedule.
The
Yeah.
proposed
Okay.
schedule, yeah.
Second.
Second.
I don't know who that was, but it was somebody.
Michael.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Ms. Hearing opposed? 6-1, Mr. Lannon. I'll send out a clean version to everybody, including the office manager and Bill and everyone, and I will ask for that to be posted also, which it usually is. Excellent. That actually takes care, I think there's a sheet running around somewhere with the Miles, you may have, okay? Just make sure you get it back to me. Report of the treasurer.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So we have a bunch of odd things going on. So primarily for Miles and Lisa, normally at this point, what we would do is circulate warrants. Those are the vehicles that we pay bills from, and what we do is ask the overseers to give it a quick review, take a look, make sure the check amount matches the amount that's in the warrant. You sign off, you pass it on to your peers. I will pass those around later, and I'll go into that here in a second. So at this point, the financials I sent out, there are no significant issues that I can see. We normally review them in depth quarterly, so this would not be a time where we do that because our financials right now aren't the way they need to be. The reason for that is our accounting firm's in transition. So we had an accounting firm in Portland, Dawson, Smith, Purvis, and Bassett that was acquired by Markham LLP. When both our CPA and the gal who did our numbers moved that to their Connecticut office, which has a bookkeeping division, the people who did the transition were superb, and we had very few issues. They then handed off to the new team that we have. And while those people are very competent, we're going through that same learning curve. So there's lots of bumps in the road. And for the warrant purposes, they did not send the information the way they had historically. So I've got to go print a couple forms, do some organization, and pass them around. Not a big deal, but bumps in the road. And I want to stress that people are very, very competent, and I think we'll end up in a better place in the long term. But first of all, we have to figure out what the running rules are. So in terms of old business, I will circulate these. If you want to send those ones to that side, one for you. So we always have, I say we always, we have contingency funds in the budget, and this year that started at $19,000. And through the overseers meetings, the overseers approved spending above and beyond certain line items for whatever reason. In this particular case, we always set aside about $5,000 for a rainy day fund. We don't know when certain accounts are going to be overspent for things we just can't see. And an example would be the police cruiser. While that is going to be under warranty, we thought we might have to pay for the transmission. There's also $5,000 that was approved to expand our police coverage, so that's coming out of contingencies. And the remainder of that list are other things that the overseers have approved. So I try to keep a running total so that you know what's available in funds when something comes along. So somebody said, gee, we'd really like to buy another speed control sign, we'd really like to pick up microphones to do the conferencing a little bit more effectively, you know what you have available to you. At this point, I think our operating variance is probably between $2,000 and $3,000. So we still have fluff left in that $5,000 number. The road budget is essentially exhausted, and that is a problem in that if we have rainstorms in the fall, we may need to spend more money in that area. But we're in a position to do so, it's just that's how those things fall together today. I had told you a while ago we're going to upgrade internet, and as is often the case, our friends at Consolidated don't have any capacity. So we're on a list, if and when they expand service here, we'll expand it. We have a 7 megabit system, which I think is what I had when the internet first came to Portland, Maine. So just, you can't do anything. My cottage has got, I think, 40. So just to give you an idea, it's very, very difficult for us to upload and download certain pieces of data. So in terms of new business, things on the horizon. So with the annual meeting behind us and the seawall project approved, I've already gone to our bond council and asked them to pull together deliverables and key dates they need from us to be able to generate bonds. Mike, I think, is probably going to talk a little bit more about this in the infrastructure project. Current thinking is we will get something through the Maine Municipal Bond Bank, which means that our final application needs to be in by February 12th, and we would have funds a couple months later. Based on the way the warrant is written, or the article was written in the warrant, we are able to issue other bonds prior to that. So if we need funds to bridge us until we get to the major construction project, we can. We just need to know what we're asking for.
Now, can I ask a question? Or do you want to wait till the end?
That's fine.
So relative to, when you're saying that, does that include 2019 or only starting in January?
From this day forward.
From this day forward? Okay, great, thank you.
So anyway, what I'm looking for, and you all received the note that I sent that included that little blurb of this is background, not for discussion, to your point, Michael. We need to understand from the infrastructure committee what they need between now and the issuance of probably the major bond, which will be the construction costs. So Mike will talk about that later, and probably be more updates coming along. There's another piece, and I don't know if Michael was going to address this or not, John Lynn.
What's that?
John Lynn.
What?
So these presentations Michael did, John
Yes.
Lynn, who's a member of the Yacht Club, not a member of the community, came down with his drone and a whole bunch of pictures of the seawall that Mike used in there. And I think there's some form of recognition that he should get from the overseers as a thank you for his
I
efforts.
think that's
Because
excellent.
he gains absolutely nothing personally from this. He did this gratis.
Gets to see one.
Sure, I know zero about this, you
Yeah,
guys.
he gets
need
a
to-
seawall just like everybody else.
The portion will lend in the bed.
I've actually acknowledged him at my
A
meetings.
thank you note would be,
Yeah.
well, I
Well,
think.
okay.
And
Okay,
I did
if you would
acknowledge.
like it to come formally from the president, please just convey the information to me and
I
I'll
can send you a short thing.
I think
with an address.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be nice. And lastly, I'm starting the final year of my term as treasurer, and I don't plan to run for re-election in 2020. So I've spent 6 years as an overseer, 5 so far as treasurer, with 1 more, which will make a total of 12. It's been an unbelievably great experience, and I mean that sincerely. So I've been working with wonderful people. It's been a phenomenal learning experience, from the village finances to the way this place goes to what makes the community work. And I have no regrets whatsoever, and in particular, I've had an awful lot of fun. So when I became treasurer, I set a number of goals, and I've realized most of those. There are a couple out there that never happened. I hoped to get some young people involved and was unsuccessful in doing so, but it was worth a try. And the last big one is the seawall. So hopefully I'll see that through to the funding piece, and then I'm going to hand it off to everybody else. And it's simply time for me to move on. This is a decision that I reached well over a year ago and decided to wait and see what happened, because sometimes I get a burst of energy and decide to move forward and continue for a while. My history of volunteerism is, there are very few things I've done for more than 5 years. So the fact that I've been here for 11 now should tell you that I've really enjoyed my time here. And I think it's really important that my mentors, Joe Huntoon and Rockways, Peter Allen, a whole host of other people, are why I chose to stay as long as I did. So. And I have a handout with some recommendations for you guys for the transition, which I will also print and get to you before this is over. Not for discussion today, but for you guys to take a look at, and then probably at the next meeting start figuring out how you want to approach this. And thanks for the opportunity.
Quick question, because when would the transition actually happen? I missed that.
My annual meeting next year will be the last one.
Okay.
And I will run out the door.
Miles?
I just had one quick question. I noticed in the material that the income from water and sewer was like half of what was projected in the budget.
Yep.
What was that about?
So we use a billing system called CUSI, C-U-S-I, which is Continental Utilities Services, or something like that. And the reports were never submitted to the accountants that would have given them the information they needed. And equally as important is within that, we have to break out things like hydrant rental and service fees, which we have not done. So those numbers are currently misstated. What I will tell you is that they are in no financial duress whatsoever. I mean, it's bulletproof. People have to pay their water and sewer bills or they get shut off. They're healthy financial. They have very, very appropriate reserves. So all good stuff, and hopefully that's going to be fixed in time for the August meeting.
Vicki?
I noticed under trees, it says the budget's 4,000, and I had thought we had this discussion a few months ago because I was under the impression the tree budget was 8,400, and I thought that was verified, so I'm wondering why does it say 4,000 and what do I have left to spend?
Yep.
Because I got a Argus on.
Good question. Well, your recollection is good. I don't remember if it was 84 or 85. What you look at every month are your financials, which include year-to-date budgets. So we load our budgets by month, and that's the amount that we allocated to spend up until this point.
Oh, okay.
You also have somewhere in the many, many emails you received from me the full year budget, which gives you all those numbers. And if you'd like, I can certainly go running around and get you the number. It's either $8,400 or $8,500.
Okay.
And the only reason you would not spend that, at
Budgeted
least,
up till that time, okay.
yeah, and that's a best guess.
Yeah.
Quite often, historically, we never budgeted anything for trees until September, October, because we never did any work in the spring. And this year was very different, so we've kind of spread it out. The only reason you would not spend that is if you and the other overseers were to say, you know what, we're really tight and we think we're going to hold this project. But the problem is every time you kick that can down the road, your budget for next year from memory is about the same. You're going to need the money. I mean, there's really no question about it. It's just if we need to get through the year by doing something different, you may make that decision.
Mike?
Back to the QC thing for a minute. We had a utilities meeting this week on Friday, and then after that meeting, Mandy and Dick and Bill and I went over the QC program. We were transitioning to a new computer, and it never really got onto that new computer correctly, so that is now done. So now we can go back and fix those things and get that all right, so that going forward, the next cycle will be fine.
Anything else for Steve? Normally I would just jump in and say, village agent takeover, but I have three quick things I have to say. One is for the new overseers, and a reminder for everybody, just in case you forget, that we are now operating under a cycle of 3-year terms for overseers and for Steve and me, the village clerk, and myself, the president. And those are in rotating cycles that at any point in time, as you observed the other night at the annual meeting, there were 3 new overseers coming on board. Steve will cycle out next year, so just a reminder about that. Secondly, I forgot to mention that it's a bit of getting back to what Mike was asking for, but traditionally I try to adhere to this as much as possible. 2 weeks before each overseers meeting, I contact the overseers and everybody at this table and say, are there items you'd like to be on the agenda for our next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks? You have a week to get back to me. This is how I like to do it. You have a week to get back to me. So then 1 week before the next meeting, I send the agenda to Dan Webster, who posted it on his site, and to Mandy, who literally posted on the boards around the village. Now, it didn't happen this meeting. Why? I found last year that because we were cycling with new overseers coming on board, it frankly made more sense to just develop the agenda as I saw it happening. Steve gave me some issues, but in general, for the rest of the year, that's how I'd like to do it. 2 weeks out, you'll get a notice from me. Please let me know if you have any agenda items. That doesn't mean if you have, something comes up 20 minutes before the meeting, you can't put it on the agenda. It's just that how we like to run that. And third, I'll probably be saying this again and again throughout the next year, but much of the success of the Northport Village Corporation is due to the institutions and controls that Steve has implemented here as treasurer. And we are extraordinarily grateful and lucky to have had you in a position. I have enjoyed you as my friend sitting next to me, but it'll be a hard transition no matter whom it's to a year from now. You have been really superb in bringing us to a place where we can more clearly see what's in front of us and more clearly see what's coming down the road. And that's what's most important, is that we're more able now to project into the future what our needs could be. So thank you very much for all you've done.
Well, and thanks for the kind words. And lest you all panic, I'm not just going to go away. My plan is to be on the finance committee for a minimum of a year, and maybe longer. You know, it's a lot less onerous commitment.
So I'm going to put you on the finance committee now.
I'm already on it. That's one.
Write it down, write it down.
But I think that's only fair, and I think the key point will be, if you can identify your likely treasurer candidate and get them involved sooner than later, that will make it much, much easier. It isn't, you know, Bill Cressy, I was chair of the finance committee for, I don't know, forever before Bill left and I took his role. So I wasn't doing the financials, but I was really up to speed on what was going on in the village. And what I would not encourage you to do is go find yourself a CPA and roll them in next August. You know, you don't need to be a CPA, you need to have a solid business understanding and be able to read a financial statement.
Thank you. Judy?
As either part of the treasurer's report or president's report at this point, we usually recommend the appointment of an assistant clerk and assistant treasurer.
Yes.
So I'm going to presume Carlton is comfortable with being the assistant clerk, and I would make a motion that we recommend to the president the appointment of Carlton.
Carlton Smith? That's right, that's Judy and second, and Carlton, C-A-R-L-E-T-O-N.
There's actually no E.
No E?
No, because it's not like the college.
Okay, Carlton, no E. She lives on the Broadway. And yes, I assume that I think she had to sign her name twice this year, so it's not been a very onerous task.
Maybe next year.
Any further discussion on that, appointment of Carlton?
And that is assistant clerk?
Assistant clerk.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor? That's unanimous. Assistant treasurer, you're right, I forget this already.
I don't know whoever it is.
That's Vicky currently.
I
Vicky, how are you feeling about being assistant treasurer?
feel very good about it, thank you.
Would you be willing to serve another year? Wonderful.
I
Thank
move
you.
that we recommend to the president that he appoint Victoria Matthews as the assistant treasurer.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Seconded by Michael Terrell. Any discussion?
I just want to say it's mostly because I'm here year-round and many other people aren't. And I'm special.
Any further discussion?
Well, that definitely helps.
All in favor?
Yeah.
And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. You all right? Moving on, report of the village agent, Mr. Page.
So one thing I'd like to say, Steve, is on August 12th, 2020, you'll be able to answer my phone calls and talk to me, because I will have a lot of things to...
That's good. Bill, I told Bill not too long ago I was no longer taking his phone calls. Because every time it came through, it was some kind of issue you needed some help with. And while I don't mind helping, it has been a particularly interesting year. Right?
Yes.
So,
Transmission.
but that'll be good. That'll be fun.
Yeah. The other thing is, I'd like to have, welcome the two new overseers to the board. It's going to be a fun trip. Not a whole lot. Good news and bad news. The transmission for the cruiser is under warranty. The process of getting that here, because we will have to pay the mechanics garage. This last week, they finally got the transmission built. They finally shipped it out. It finally arrived at the garage last week. I had talked to the owner of the garage that Friday before that, and she said it should be on its way. I called back, we had a safety committee meeting, and Mr. Terrell wanted a better answer on where we were at. So I called back that Monday morning, and I got a message that the garage was closed until the 19th. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me that? The next day, the day before. So, me being me, I got a hold of one of the mechanics that works there. And he said, no, I'm working this week. And so I asked what his schedule was, and he says, well, he says, I got this, this, and this, and this. I said, okay, good. He called me back later that afternoon, he says it arrived on freight. So they got the transmission. So then I kept pestering him. Have you got it in yet? Have you got it in yet? And he said, no, I got these other things. He said, hopefully near the middle of the week or the end of the week, I'll be working on it. Then he got smart and sent me a picture of an electric chain. Said, this is your transmission. So I thought that was a little funny. But so anyway, on Thursday of this week, when I came back from Waterville with the sewer, taking the sewer samples to the labs and stuff, I deliberately went to the garage to have face-to-face. You know, I'm getting tired of the police officers constantly, I need a car, I need a car, I need a car, you know. Push it along, I'm standing there, we get the car on the lift, we start bolting things and taking things apart, and I said, well, it looks like, you know, maybe by Friday night we'll have our cruiser back. So I said, well, I'm going to leave, get out of here, and I'm going to leave, yeah, that's fine. Now, about 11 o'clock, I get a phone call from the guy, just a ring. I'm like, calm down. They sent the wrong transmission.
Oh, no.
They sent a Chevy transmission, a Ford transmission. And I said, how the hell did that? They got the original invoice on the original transmission thing. Somewhere along the line, whether it was the garage in New Hampshire put a wrong number on that invoice, or our garage, she put down a wrong number on the invoice. So I said, okay, I do not have the phone number for this other company who's manufacturing this and getting it sent to us, because it's on that invoice, because I was in such a hurry to get it to the garage, to get the process going, I forgot to duplicate it. I said, I got some number. So I tried one number, and I got this big international company, and they couldn't find us in the system, and so I spent an hour and a half. This phone to my ear, and this phone to my ear, for an hour and a half. Finally, I got the right number, got the right place, and got the exact woman I talked to who was perfect. I mean, they do have one person there who is excellent at customer service. She says, yes, I remember you, and you were the one on vacation 2 weeks ago, and I told you not to worry about a thing, and you know, I mean, this. She says, I don't understand this either. And I says, well, let me just put something in there, because I remember the police chief saying that for some reason he bought 2 transmissions at the same time, and one of the transmissions was going to be just sitting there because it's hard to get these transmissions that are not, you can't readily get. You have to have a company find them, remanufacture them and that. So he had one set. Well, he never said that it was a different, you know, it was a Chevy, not a Ford. That set a light off to her. She went back through the computer system. She went back to them. She says, yep, that's the problem. They did order 2. Their mechanic, their garage, ordered 2. On the sheet that they sent you, he put the wrong number on it. So I said, okay, so now what does that mean? She says, oh yeah, it's going to take 4 to 5 days to build it, and it's going to be shipped from Nebraska. So I'm saying, oh, another 2 weeks. So now we're going to be into September.
see why I don't take Bill's calls.
The good news is, I was talking to Ben the other day, and he actually said that.
Ben's one of our police officers.
Right.
Michael and Ben are two police
So,
officers.
and he said he's been enjoying, some of the time without the car, being able to walk around and talk to people is much more personal, so they're still out there doing things without the cruisers.
Community policing.
What's that?
Community policing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I would think we should even consider a bicycle for them as an alternative to the car sometimes, in general for the future. Not today, but just in general, because it's more personal.
So we think we'll have a cruiser sometime in September. I put a lot, maybe we think we'll have possibly a cruiser, it could be sometime in September. Miles?
This is one of those dumb questions from you, but what exactly is a village agent? And what does a village agent do?
Good question.
Put him up there with St. Peter, St. Michael.
Mr. Page, you're the one who mentioned it.
My understanding of what a village agent is,
Bill is our village agent.
you oversee us set once a month, you oversee us vote, you run everything to do with the thing. In between, somebody needs to make sure that everything that you guys have voted to do and the operation of the village corporation runs smoothly and gets done. Because you guys have no authority, once you leave this room today, to make those things happen.
Well said.
Such as, we say, yes, we're going to redo the electrical upstairs, and we vote on it, but somebody's got to talk to the electrician.
So,
And also, he splits his time between water, sewer, and the village.
Right.
So-
I work for the three entities. I work for the sewer and the water department and here. So you won't hear a lot of things that I do here. And sometimes my workload is more for the utilities than it is for the overseers, but lately it's kind of equaling out right now. So I get run pretty thin.
And in the wintertime, you would see Billy snow plowing and sanding roads and doing all the things that make Bayside work.
And one of the amazing things is, if somebody's pipes burst in the wintertime, they can tell, the utilities can tell, because the water reports change. And Bill goes out and tries to identify whose house, whose home, residence, if they're not there, has the leak, which is, I think, just amusing that they can do that.
And remember, this is being recorded, and that's the responsibility of the homeowner.
Yes.
Yeah, I know,
They pay for the water.
but it is an
Miles?
identification, yeah.
I guess I had some sense of that just from living here for a little bit of time, but in terms of formalities or something, is there a job description and what happens if Bill's not around?
There is, and I would be happy to discuss that with you either offline or in a different way. I don't want to take up the time right now this week, but the answer is yes.
I would say, too, to add to it, I think the definition of the village agent's role has been evolving. In the last year, we've had active conversations about that, and for instance, we shifted how the safety committee is defined and its mission, and took the safety committee out of the management of the police department and the lifeguards, and that's now under Bill's umbrella. Safety committee involvement, and that's an important distinction. And so he does now, there are personnel that report to him.
Would it be safe to call him the CEO of the village?
Yeah, and
I don't know if he wants to have that title, but.
it is a position articulated as, in the bylaws as an essential position. There is a separate job description as well. And we couldn't live without him, but whenever he does try to get on vacation, we do have backup procedures that we put in place so that we're not left alone. Peter Simpson is the backup
Primary.
typically, and our superintendent of utilities also is on board.
Bill?
Okay,
Keep going.
so the car thing, straightened out. The lighting that we've had the long process with upstairs in the community hall, they're still waiting for a light socket. They had to order a special light socket, I guess, because the light's so old. So I'm still waiting for that, and then for them to get back to me on that. I did see an email that came out of the annual meeting that the lighting seemed to be dimmer than normal. I did pick up on that. I didn't think that it was contributed to just that one light being out. I have hesitated to go to the brighter light bulbs because they have this kind of a
Blue haze.
white light, because it's supposed to be natural light, but it is a lot brighter. I believe we're at 100-watt light bulbs now. I don't know how we're gonna get it any brighter if we don't upstep to maybe that, the spectrum of light, and the way your eyes perceive things, or adding more light upstairs. I don't know, but I just want to throw that out where we are on that.
Vicki?
Are you looking for advice on that?
Well, not
Or guidance?
today, but
Okay.
just kind of maybe think about it. I know it's an issue, we don't want to make it, I've held back because I don't want to make it look like fluorescent lights upstairs in the whole building. Try to stay.
Another time, I just wanted to know if you wanted to
Okay.
discuss it now.
And then the other issue that I'd like you to kind of think about while you're thinking of that lighting, we've had a lot of issues with the lightings down here. You see how they flicker and stuff, and we're changing the bulbs all the time, but they seem to flicker. They're pretty, they've been up there a while, bulbs been changed. There is a new thing out, and I haven't talked to them yet, but it's like a strip that you do away with the light bulbs, and there's a strip put in there that is an LED strip, and they're a lot brighter, and you don't get that flicker. I don't know what the cost is for that yet.
Is that something you want to investigate, or?
Not yet, in the winter.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's a winter time.
Over the winter, I'm just spitting it out there. And then, we're gonna start to get working on the library fence, starting to replace some of that. That's in the process, and we're also gonna rechange the entryway right there where the walkway is, because there is a bad trip hazard there, the way that it was laid out and set up. So we're gonna try to change that and do away with that trip hazard, because some older people have twisted their ankles and things on it. It's just not a good project unless there's something going on there for a safety issue. Other than that, I think we're pretty well on track with
Vicki?
those things. I got a lot of things to catch up on.
Where were we with the no parking on North Street?
Well, that was, you wasn't, I thought you was going to bring that up. But I have heard from 1 North Street. They sent me a copy of their deed. They've sent me an email, whatever you have to do to fix the banking and whatever, and da-da-da-da-da, they're all on board. I believe an email came to John from 1 Clinton Street. There's a lawyer involved. At this point, I haven't been able to physically go down there yet and do some measurements, and I don't feel comfortable going down there without some other representation with me where there's a lawyer involved.
Well,
What we're trying to determine is whether that property is village property or not village property.
Right.
Did he formally respond to your letter is the first?
I received an email from a phone call from an attorney representing 1 Clinton, I believe, and they claimed to be completely unaware of the issue and did not know what we were talking about at all. Bill suggests that may not be the case.
And we had that discussion the year before. Remember Brockway and I went over, we measured, we discussed it, we talked about the signs with the guy, we talked about his wood pile and all that stuff, so it is not a first time.
Okay, wait, so I didn't know that, so I see no reason to, what was the evaluation then, a year ago, when you went over with the debt, that it was village property?
Well, I don't remember because it didn't get written.
Vicki, I
It
think,
needs to be remeasured.
Mike,
But I don't want to walk on this guy's property at this point to try to remake that.
I understand that.
I'm happy to.
There's
Mike?
two separate issues here. There's the wood pile and the overflowing of the water, which is what we talked about last year, Brock talked about. The sign thing I don't think was brought up last year. So
That's 1 North Avenue.
Yeah.
That's 1 North, it's a little confusing, but there are two properties that both have the number 1 in them, okay?
Right, but the 1 North Avenue is the one with the wood pile.
That's
Wood pile and with
So
the
when we
signage.
talk to that person,
Maybe someone from the public can elucidate. Blair,
I had that listing several years ago.
which one are you referring to now?
We're talking about the one Pleasant.
One-
I mean, the one Clinton.
1 Clinton, okay.
Gordon's old house.
That wood pile is on public property.
And the other properties is
No, the wood pile, not one.
Wood pile is up north.
and the
Okay.
wood pile
Wood pile is
is
at 1
owned
North.
by the 1 North people
That was Gordon's
Vicky?
property. When we were
Okay, I just want
at the
to
end of the room.
bring the new overseers up to speed slightly.
And maybe the old ones too.
And the old ones, okay? There has been, very slowly, whether it's obvious or people are aware of it and and people have chosen not to do anything, residents who are inching their possessions onto village property and claiming it as their own. Right now, the issue is at 1 North Street. There are signs that say private property, private parking for 1 North Street only. It is village property, okay? And I am saying that at some point, we need to seriously start dealing with these issues. There are people that are planting trees on village property without consultation, with all of the side effects of that. This is, I think, a gross overstepping of boundaries. And if we don't start making some decisions about these things, the parking is an issue, but this is a private person putting signs up. If he can put signs up, I want to put signs up too, because there's a lot of village property around my house that I'd like to have access to. Okay, so that's where we are with this. And we're going into month 3 with this issue.
Actually,
Okay.
With all due respect to Clinton Street, I'm concerned about 1 North.
Mike Lennon.
Yeah, so just to back up one step further for the new overseers. So the village is unique in the sense that nobody really owns their front yard. Most of the roads, where all the cottages are lined up, like Park Row, like Main Street, like Maple Street, like Clinton, all those, the right-of-way actually starts right about at the porch. And all the roads have a 35-foot right-of-way except for Main Street, which has a 45-foot right-of-way. So if you really look at how wide the roads are, obviously there's a good 10 feet on either side that are owned by the village. And I don't think that we've ever had really much of an issue with people sort of improving that in front of their house and so on. It's just that then when we go to do projects, people start to get possessive of that land, and we can't have that when we need to put in a new drainage ditch or something like that. And along the lines of what Vicky's talking about, I think it's true about, you can't have somebody putting up private parking signs where the sign might be on their property, but there's no way a car could park in it unless they were into the road, and then that doesn't seem like it
We've
should.
had people putting boulders, so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this,
So what is the will of the overseers? I have sent letters, just as a reminder, I've sent letters to the address here, the home address, and they've been inserted into the door of both owners, 1 North and 1 Clinton. 1 Clinton had an attorney respond saying they were uncertain as to what was going on. Could we please talk about it? I talked about it on the phone and said it's all in the letter there, it's very clear. And they said they would talk to their client. 1 North has not really responded. Mr. Lamb.
Yeah, I was going to talk with respect to infrastructure, because I was going to bring that up as the reason why we were doing this. So infrastructure-wise, I met with the engineer out there, and we were looking at a way to put in a new storm drain there that would connect to that pipe that may or may not require everything to be removed. And then the other thing is Paul Bernanke is supposed to be giving me a quote again for the stabilization that we had talked about with he calls it the Tootsie Roll, in other words, the things that he can do that again this fall. He wants to do it in the fall. In order to do that properly, that wood pile should be moved. So
That's 1 North.
that's 1 North. So that wood pile should be moved so that banking can be corrected. Now, I think we could do the design work with the engineer, so trying to get the engineer to do the design of that at the same time as the seawall, and then we'll have this construction done together, so it's all one thing. So it's not, it'll be
Right.
much less expensive. I don't think we need anything to happen with respect to the design and the installation of the storm drain. It's just that the normal flow there is for the water to overflow along that whole length, and now it's overflowing like a 6 or 8 foot strip between the woodpile, between where 1 Clinton has encroached. So, so that's, I just wanted to give an update of that. I don't have the perfect solution, but.
Vicki?
I would like One North to remove their no parking signs.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so to clarify, the parking sign is on village property. It's not on theirs and their parking. It's on village property.
No, I think it's on their property.
But it's directing,
It's
it creates the
directed at
impression
village.
that the place in front of the sign is owned by the person who placed
I
the
see, so you
sign.
can't just go and remove the sign, it's village property.
There's 3 of them and they're really lovely. They cost some money.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I would think you have to remeasure
I
and then
believe
ask them to kindly
Judy?
remove their signs.
I think that John's letter, to the extent it was responded to by a lawyer. So I think a lawyer needs to respond to that letter.
That's one.
That's as to 1 Clinton. And I think that since you had no response to your letter from the One North, that a lawyer should be doing that follow-up.
You're confused.
No, 1 Clinton got,
1 Clinton is who got back to him. One
Clinton
North did not get back to
got
him.
back to me with the email, knowing what was going on, and sent me the copy of the deed. One Clinton.
Okay.
Clinton.
They're the ones that have the parking where they put in some retaining wall and planted a tree
The tree, right,
in a tub. It's not in the ground, it's in
Right.
a tub.
right.
That's 1 Clinton Street.
I just took
That
over,
is the fraud.
That's what you just
I
said.
think,
That's what you just said.
I want to say Fry, but I'm not sure if that's what their name is off the top of my head.
So we have
1 North Street, 1 North Street has the no parking signs, the wood pile, and
Right.
a post with some ropes in it.
right. So I think at this point, the Dick Brockway and you went down and talked
Last year.
last year. They got a letter from the president, and you've seen no forward motion. And we have a eroding bank that we need to address, that we're happy to address, to preserve those very people who are claiming more land than they own. I think that a lawyer needs to be the next person to deal with it.
Mike?
I would love to see us separate the 2 issues, and I know, Vicki, you feel strongly about the signs, and I get that. But I just have a short timeline where the woodpile needs to move if we're going to do it this fall, while we're still in growing
But the
season.
signs and the woodpile are the same owner.
They are, but the woodpile is definitely not on their property.
Right.
There's no doubt about that.
But
The
I-
signs may be or may not be, so that's why I would like to see it separated, if that can streamline getting rid of the woodpile faster.
There's no constructive way to have a half conversation with
Okay,
them.
I
I don't think.
understand. As a lawyer, I understand what
I
you're saying.
think that they need to engage in the conversation.
Okay.
They have been very effective in not engaging, and so I think it's time for them to engage.
Okay.
And ultimately, part of that conversation is, we're doing this to protect your property. And so you ought not to be in the way by claiming a couple extra inches, because those inches are going away if we can't fix the bank.
So I agree, Judy, that a lawyer should generate a letter. And so as a lawyer, do you have any ideas as to who that lawyer should be?
I'm happy to write the next letter. I don't want to commit to hours and hours of my life, because one, I try not to be involved in litigation with my neighbors. It's not constructive. And two, I'm too busy. But if I have authority today to write a letter, I would run it by John, and then I would get that out before the next overseers meeting. Although I know you'd like it done soon, you'd like a resolution so that you can get going.
So would it be safe to say that it's unlikely that we're doing any of that Tootsie Roll work this season? Because At this rate,
I
right?
think at this rate, yeah.
But I could still have them design the stormwater and have that set.
I think
We can do that without moving.
Right.
We can't do any of the reinforcement until that goes.
Vicki?
Yeah, things run slowly. Again, for the new people, we had a discussion a few months ago, and if there are many opportunities to have questions about where a property owner's land is. The way I understand it is, it's up to the property owner to have if they dispute it, to have their property surveyed. We will not survey their property as the village. That you prove to us that it's your property and not ours, versus if it gets to that point. Just want to clarify that.
And while we were talking, I forwarded to the two of you the email summary that John has sent to the overseers reporting his conversation with the lawyer. So that gives...
Is there a motion on the floor?
Can I just ask for clarification to your comment? So are you saying that this Tootsie Roll work wouldn't go forward this season because we can't get this resolved in time?
Yeah, because Paul said the only way to truly reinforce, because he wants to make it so that things can overflow properly when there's an extra. The goal is the storm drain will handle most of the flow, but it also will overflow during huge storms. And that's the part that the Tootsie Roll is going to help ultimately. And you can't do that work until the woodpile moves because it's...
Right, but that's what I'm asking. Are we not doing the work that we need to do because this issue hasn't been resolved? Because that seems like, why are we doing that?
Well, I don't think that we should say that it won't be resolved, because we should be reinforcing for the people watching that we're going to do everything we can, because we have tried to engage the homeowners, and they have not engaged, and they are interfering with our being effective in preserving and protecting their property through their silence. So we will contact them, we will impress upon them the urgency of the matter, but the tools in our toolbox don't include my throwing them up against the wall and saying this is going to happen.
Miles?
How much does it cost to move the woodpile? Why didn't the village just move the woodpile?
I think I personally would not feel comfortable with that self-help, because it could be argued that it was conversion of their property, even if we moved it onto their property. You try to avoid those, head-to-heads. I'm happy to incorporate into the letter that we are prepared to do that. If it's just...
We have had other situations in the past, including the issue of wood piles, where owners have placed their property onto village land. And we have worked very hard with them to be the ones to take the steps to fix the situation, rather than have us do it.
But can we set a date by which they should have the
The
woodpile?
letter would have a deadline.
Jeffrey?
Well, I think there's 2 points. One is, I think we need to start some educational process, maybe using Dan's website, that gets people to understand this whole concept of setback. Because I think there are some people that just ignore it and do anything they want, but there are many people that just don't understand. So it seems to me that we just need some basic community understanding where your property line falls. Number one. Number two, if I choose to park my car on Main Street and it starts to snow and I haven't moved it for months, at some point the village is just going to tow my car away because it's in the way of community progress. I would argue the same thing's true of the woodpile.
Right. And the analogy is a good one. The missing step there is that we tow the car only because we've adopted the winter streets ordinance, and we don't have a fire pile ordinance. You're absolutely right that the need for communication. I remember back in when we paved Main Street, more than one homeowner on Main Street flipped out and called me at home because the letter from Mr. Cressy, which was a very, candid, we're going to pave this road, you've all asked for us to pave it, and just so you know, the road is this wide, and we're going to pave it this wide, but you should know that you don't own, and people weren't thrilled with that education. And my ears are still buzzing.
It
Is
what
there
it
a
is.
motion on the
Exactly.
floor, please?
Is there one?
No,
There is not yet a motion in terms of asking an attorney to send a letter.
Yes.
Well, I would move that.
Okay, I second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Yes, further discussion?
Almost made it.
Almost made it. So you don't think that we could move the wood pile if we moved it, say, up the hill to the fire pond, where it wasn't, we didn't move it onto their property? I'm just asking.
The letter that I would write would lay out the options available to the homeowner to protect his property, his wood pile, so that we don't take any legal actions that we believe we have. And by a certain date, it would be forceful as to that. I wouldn't say further as to what I think we can and cannot do.
Okay, at this point.
Because what
Well,
you
it
want to
depends on
do
what
is,
they
it'll
decide.
be a forceful letter, given the fact that we've tried hard to have this dialogue for a year and it's interfering with your work.
I won't say anything else on this one.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. Thank you, I'll be in touch with you.
Okay.
I'm sorry that took so long, but I have another issue for the village agent.
Go ahead.
Okay, so there has been discussion on my little piece of Griffin Street, notice how I take ownership, about the house that's being built there that is quite large, and the permit is for 1,940 square feet. There's a question as to whether that's 1,940 square feet. Is there somebody that checks that? Because the statement from the person questioning it was, either you do something about it now, or it's a big nightmare after the house is built. Yes.
Bill?
You have to go to the town code enforcement officer
Yeah.
to be and make a complaint with her, and she will come and make sure that it's in compliance.
So do the overseers do that, or?
No, an individual does that.
The abutters, all code enforcement is through the town. Each individual homeowner who has an issue with the zoning and the implementation of the zoning have a direct ear with Tupi.
Okay.
To be Rooney, who is the code enforcement officer of the town of North.
I'll
Are
just
you
pass
talking
that
about
information.
height or square footage of home?
Well, it's big. I don't know if there's no height thing listed on the permit that I could see, but it is listed at 1,940 square feet.
The height limitations of the ordinance are 35 feet.
What are we talking about?
The Big Erie house on.
Height limitations are 35 feet?
Oh. Yeah.
Is that 35 feet? Anybody know? Okay, anyway.
It's
Thank
not
you.
35 feet. 35 feet is tall, Vicki. It's 3
35 feet is
stories.
very tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else for the
Stretches out
village
to
agent?
35 feet.
Right.
Office manager?
Nope,
You're sure?
everybody who needs to know knows.
Okay. Committee reports,
John, can I ask,
please.
before you dive into them, this is, I don't have a solution, I don't want to talk about it forever, but,
Why'd you look at me when you said that?
I wonder if we can think about the agenda differently. I find these agendas, it seems, I don't know how to do it, I would have an opinion, I just don't want to get into it here, but I just ask, can we order it differently? Because it seems like we do a lot of things that I would describe as less important before we get to the more important. And then we're so deep into the meeting by the time we get to this. So I just find that, I don't know what the solution is, but.
Would you rather the committee reports go first, before, say, the reports of the president, treasurer,
It
village
just
agent?
seems to me that there's a number of things that are very important, that require a lot of conversation, and we often get to them 2 and 3 hours into a meeting. And yet we talked about wood piles and all the rest, the levels that are mind-numbing at times. So I just wonder if we can rethink it, you know.
All right, what are the other overseers?
I think there's a logic to putting the committee reports first because they are zippered in with Billy's work in any event. So we can get to the village agent stuff through the committee reports often. I also think that there's a lot to be said for saying nothing to report in furtherance of my committee report if there is nothing to report. And if we get our committee reports like you always do in writing ahead of time.
And I think some of what Bill walks us through could be in writing, and we could look at it ahead of time and just say, okay, my report's been submitted. And so we don't have to, because I find as a committee, we have to be very careful. As a board, we can get board-like and have conversations about things that are taking a lot of time, and their relative importance is hard to define. And yet we have, if you look at this agenda, we have a lot of things on here that we're going to have a long conversation on. So that's, I'm just asking if we can rethink it. But I don't have a solution, nor do I have a motion. I'm just asking if we could.
I think it doesn't need to be a motion. I'm happy to experiment, and for the September meeting, I'll move the committee reports to the top after the questions and issues from Bayside residents, and move the 4 reports of the president, treasurer, village agent, office manager after them. I'll just simply flip them, and let's see how that works. Until we do it, we won't know. Will that satisfy?
And then maybe we can have the special topics then, even above that, I think is what you're getting.
Well, there's a comment, I always say new and continuing business at the bottom, so there's an opportunity if somebody says, there's something that we haven't talked about that I'd like to talk about, so there's always an opportunity for that. I'll try that next, is it okay with everyone else?
Yeah.
Seems fine, who cares? All right, we'll see. I'll make that note. Now, committee reports.
Tree committee, you're probably talking about me and my report.
Yes,
Yeah,
tree committee,
because
Ms.
I
Mathis.
used to be at the end, and then everybody was out the door, and I was sitting here talking, so we fixed that problem. Actually, so we're in the process of tagging all the trees we surveyed, and that's going fine. We met with Jane Santier from the Maine Department of Agriculture and Urban Trees, and a couple pieces of information if you get questioned. The emerald ash borer is in Maine in the north and in the south. It hasn't hit the mid-coast area. We have a lot of ash trees in our parks, which is what the tree committee is focusing on most right now. But it's expected that the emerald ash borer might be 2 or 3 years before it hits the mid-coast area. So that gives us some time to think and plan if we're going to do anything. The brown-tailed moth, people, a lot of discussion about that and what it does to the trees and whatever. It's here. There's nothing you can really do about it. Some things have been planned. People in the community have asked what we're going to do about it. Nothing. Everybody needs to take care of their own brown-tailed moth problem. If you have brown-tailed moths in your trees, generally the tree will survive 2 or 3 assaults, but the 3rd assault, generally the tree starts to die. In tagging yesterday, we did identify a village tree that had several nests of brown-tailed moths. I will bring that to the committee and see what they want to do about it. Some guy up there sniffing them out. I wanted to clarify the budget because what I did put off this year was the pruning in Blaisdell Park and Bayview because the trees needing pruning weren't posing any hazard. I hope to have the arborist go ahead and complete that, as we don't have any hazardous trees at this point that need to come down, whereas last year about this time we had like 5 very difficult, meaning 3 of them very difficult and very expensive. The tree committee is going to be tasked with planning about planting next year, so hopefully if we don't lose too many trees over the winter, we can start replacing some trees. Choosing the appropriate tree, which again, Ms. Santier from the State of Maine Board of Agriculture gave us some good ideas. And did you know that maple trees along the seacoast take a real beating because of the salt water? So there are maples that are hardier for salt water. Anyway, a lot of interesting stuff. The one thing, the good news, that's all, the good news. Good news is in deciding what to do about the safety area of the basketball court, which is the bad news, we were talking about who would maintain a green area, a landscaped area if we planted it. And, somebody said garden club, but there is no garden club. But the name that kept coming out was Lisa Webster. So I met Lisa Webster and I said, hey, how do you feel about a garden club? So we are going to try to rejuvenate a garden club to officially take care of, hopefully around the library, the dinghy down in the middle of the park, and the stuff here and whatever. So hopefully we'll see how that works for next spring. And nothing has been done about the basketball court. I reported several months ago that she was going to start over Memorial Day weekend. We had an extremely rainy May and June, and I gave her a lot of leeway. We've been trying to make contact, we can't even make contact. So I am canceling for now, in my official capacity as chairman of the tree committee and the tree warden. I'm canceling any monies to be spent, and we will take that back to the drawing board and see what happens. If anybody has any objections to that, let me know.
I don't have an objection, I wish I had a conversation with you prior, because I did speak to her. I
Oh.
saw her the other day, and I mentioned where I am in this. And she was saying September's better, and she was aiming for September. And she has more inventory, of course, which we're getting donated for September. So I just asked you to reconsider that.
Well, that's what I heard last year, so I'm hearing the same things, and I've got nothing that guarantees to me for the 3 times that she should be there this summer, so we will regroup, I can reconsider.
Thank you.
Okay.
But you and I can get, try to pin her down. But
Okay.
you're right, I mean, we're not here to be, strung along. But-
Right, but it's because of the commitment as part of this is the donated materials. We don't want
We heard that last year,
Say
though, too,
goodbye.
and then I heard donated materials for the spring, so I love donated materials, I've got some to
But to
donate.
quote Vicky, patience is a virtue.
Sing.
Anything else from the tree warden?
The last word on that one.
Communications committee?
Communications, I have nothing to report.
Finance committee?
Nothing to report except to applaud Steve. Sorry, I got emotional. Particularly in the transitions with Markham, he's been handling them beautifully. And I really appreciate the background that he has.
So will the finance committee try to put together a schedule for searching, or how does that work to find the treasurer?
I don't know what the next step would be, as what
Okay.
the finance committee will do. I'll confer with Steve and Joe and Nadine
Yeah,
to see what they would propose.
okay, good.
And Steve, you have something to say?
Not a finance committee issue. You need a human resource committee.
I agree.
And you need Blair from a nominating committee perspective.
Oh, yeah, after that,
But
Well,
just-
or in addition to, I don't see that as a later. I think that all needs to come together. You need to figure out if that candidate's gonna come from within the group that's here. You need to figure out if you need to go elsewhere to find a body,
yeah.
but it's not a finance committee responsibility.
I mean, I would just assume kick the can down the road and tell you you have to keep doing it, but that's not
You
gonna
know,
work out, so.
and trust
He doesn't strike me as the type that
There's-
will follow through
me,
on his commitment.
there's parts of me that hate to leave,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
But, no, it is time.
So it's just, it seems like it's gonna be a pretty long thing that we have to work. I would also.
Governance committee?
Governance Committee did not have a meeting this month, so nothing to report. I have to circle back with Angela. We had sort of put the scheduling based on the task she has to complete, and she's doing her best to do it.
Okay.
And with the seawall, we were more than happy to not impose more public meetings on people.
Right.
I know there was some back and forth between the town of Northport and Bayside about their confusion, I think, regarding our
And
attendance.
Bill Kelly was able to answer the questions. I had dictated a letter, and Bill Kelly's, my answers were all the same, so that was good. The Board of Appeals had heard a appeal that relates to Upper Maple Street and Upper Main here, and after they granted the conditional variance, they wrote to us and said, do we have jurisdiction to do these things? So both Bill Kelly and I were, yes, you have jurisdiction, you're the only people with jurisdiction to do these things.
Okay.
So,
Vicki, would you? have any-
I was just wondering where we were with the zoning. Do we anticipate that we're going to have new zoning regulations next year to be voted on, or?
I
is this a-
think we will. Okay, so the results of the survey were that 70% of the people who responded were very intent upon the idea of an architectural review board in the historic district. The rest of the zoning ordinance, people nibbled around. There's issues about commerce, there's issues about enforcement, there's issues that, like what you just raised. A lot of people worry about what's the point of having an ordinance if we don't get it enforced. That's a liaison issue with the town, we'll work on that. So what the committee had committed to do is let's look at some architectural review board materials. Angela volunteered to do that. other resources. So when she gets that to us, we will then have a meeting among the committee members to review those materials and start redlining what we have as to that. We also have on our plate the parking ordinance, which is in existence, and we moved that very high up because this summer in particular has been nightmarish. We've talked with the police particularly about, it's all well and good for us to be working on an ordinance in the future, but there are some baseline parking rules that are general motor vehicle rules. Please enforce those, particularly like you have to park with the flow of traffic. So if you're on the left side of a road, your car should be facing up, not down. You cannot park, you all have your license, within 20 feet of an intersection. We all see over and over again people parking within 20 feet of an intersection. Our ordinance says that you can't park on both sides of Bay Street. People routinely park on two sides of Bay Street. We have an ordinance that probably doesn't have the proper, it was adopted in 2005 or so, and it probably doesn't have the proper enforcement language in it to allow the police officers to give a ticket under the ordinance. But we are going to talk, we have talked with him, Billy, I say we because Billy does this dialogue with them because he's their supervisor. Try to get them to enforce what they can enforce through regular old motor vehicle rules in the meantime. We had an ambulance go down to the dock this summer for Lindsay, and she was fine, but can you imagine if it was your child and that ambulance was blocked by those racers who come and stay and park? They don't even park on the side, they park in the road.
Yeah.
Same thing on Main Street, same thing on Maple Street. People love your paving, but that makes curves, and then people don't want to hurt their grass, which of course their grass is our grass because it's our road, and so they park in the road. And it's a carnival game, trying to get down our streets. We had, I give you the floor, Laird Townsend, one of our dearest friends in the world, owns a Ford 350 pickup. He came to visit us 3 weeks ago and ultimately drove home to Belfast and called us because he tried to get down each side road and could not get safely down with his truck. So he went back to Belfast and said,
Needs a small
thinking of you
truck."
guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mike?
No, I
Mike?
just, I'm glad you brought it up because it was part of the safety committee meeting the other day where we talked, and so we're getting a lot of people raising it, not a lot, but more than your average issue, and especially in Ruggles Park, people are parking that have area homes, and that's where they're parking now. And as we were sitting at the meeting, Park Row, somebody on Park Row was taking delivery of propane. So this gigantic propane truck went around the parked cars and the congregate down through the park. And all of a sudden there's this giant thing, and I was like, oh God, now we've got this going on. So, it's a huge, and then the police are all over it because if there ever was an issue, you can't get safety vehicles down the street, so.
And we have had our sewer operator who goes down every morning at 4:30 to take the samples and put the chemicals on the treatment plant. He has had trouble getting the chemicals delivered because a certain size truck can't come down here, and that causes timing issues for us because we have to get the promise of the guy with the small truck.
And I got into a thing the other day, we were having some paving done somewhere, and there was a paving truck with a giant paving dump truck with a trailer, and that was parked half into Ruggles Park for like 3 days, and I'm calling them saying, you gotta get that out of there. So, can we accelerate it for next season?
Yeah, we would absolutely have it as a priority.
And would that require signage so that people, like for instance in Ruggles Park, there's no signage that
Right.
says no park?
Right. There used to be, just the handicap, no parking near the sewer building and handicap parking down at the railing, but you're right, we don't have any no parking.
Mike?
We went over parking last year quite a bit with the seawall stuff. And the interesting thing that the engineer pointed out, and they had all these historical pictures they had come in here, because they wanted to kind of keep us sort of, in line and so on with what we've been doing. And we looked at managed parking, and basically, the feeling was, and that we presented upstairs, was that it had never been that way, and sort of the character of the park is somewhat sporadic in how people park, and that was sort of the way it's been since cars were invented, literally. And so we didn't want to take away from that, so I just want to, let's keep that in mind, that, we don't want to like set up parking spots, because it would change the sort of the character of the park to have organized, angular parking, because that was the question. If we
This is
lose
for the
these-
governance committee to worry about for the moment. I don't want
Well,
to
but
get into
right,
discussion
you're right,
right now,
there should be,
please.
safety needs to be part of that dialogue and.
As well as
and
historical.
infrastructure.
That's all I was saying.
I will ask, Judy, for the sake of people watching and our new overseers, what will the process be when the governance committee comes to final thoughts regarding both zoning and parking? What's the next step in the process?
Well, I want to make sure that the governance committee's on board with how I would define it, and we haven't had that conversation, but at the very least, there's at least, as a matter of law, a requirement for public meetings
Okay.
before we can adopt anything. As to, I think it was Article 10 on our ordinance, on our annual warrant, and there was that language about we get to do ordinances provided we adhere to all the public hearing rules, and that seemed to cause a little bit of anxiety about people. Does this mean you're going to sneak things under the wire? No, it means that we're going to assure that nothing is snuck under the wire.
But that ordinances are adopted around this table, they do not have to go to an annual meeting for
Right.
approval.
Right.
Just to make sure everyone understands that. Thank you.
Before we move to the next report, I have warrants ready to come around. There are no invoices attached, and if you look at the body of the warrant, it lists every bill that should be there, and they aren't all there. And part of the reason they aren't all there is the accountants changed the date that we're going to function with certain checks to align the way financials report. So most of those you signed last month. So on a leap of faith, I'd say you can sign this, you can choose not to if you want to until I gather everything together, but I don't know when that will be. But the ones that are in there that are signed by me are all expenses that we see on a regular basis. They make sense to me. They're in the right value range for those sorts of transactions, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you.
And there are no lines on the warrants, so if you could just sign them somewhere.
Just follow Vicky's
Here?
path.
The last page.
The last
The last
page, there's
page.
blank
On the last
space.
page of each one.
All right?
The last page of this guy, this is a data. So on this side of this one. And on that one, I don't know if that's yeah, on that one, and then the other one just at the bottom of that first page, because there was not a second page. Thank you.
Thank you. Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Lamb.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the seawall in a sec, but the last, one of the items was parkings and signs. So I just wanted to talk about that at the annual meeting. There was some discussion of some of the signs, and Michael and I had informal conversations, just the two of us, nobody else involved, before, about some of the signs, about speed signs in places where there aren't any, and also parking, and also this, actually, we even talked about that stop sign that's not there on all the roads that come down, and someone brought that up. I didn't ask them to do that, they just did. So that's something else I think that we can talk about with the safety stuff, because it seems that the speed stuff has really worked out well with the policemen, but now the parking seems to be, like you said, it's like a slalom course at times, which, and in one of those cars can have a kid running out after a ball. So that's the next issue there, but we already talked about that, so that's enough of that. So let's just get to the seawall, the other stuff, the North Street we already talked about, so. I did speak to the engineers after our meeting, and obviously, I told them that the timeline and so on, and obviously one of their questions was, well, can we get started? And that's why I sent you that email, and that's good. It's good to know that they can get started, because we did have that meeting with Brock, excuse me, not Brock. Brock wasn't there, but Brock was there, down at the waterfront, and we looked at, how it could possibly be constructed. And their number one recommendation was we try to do this as soon as possible, get it on the street as soon as possible, because we're hoping to get the best cost. So The short story is, the engineers are gonna start to put together a scope of work to finish it. We're gonna put it all together as one package. We feel that it can be done by a Farley and Sons type of construction firm as well as a proc. So we're gonna put it together as one package, and then the bidders can decide how they would split that up. And we're gonna try to get that on the street as soon as possible. So my goal is around Islesboro time to have an infrastructure meeting, hopefully with the scope of work, and discuss what the plan is to finish the engineering and design, and then have that get ready to get out the street. They're giving me a quote to go all the way to bid documents.
For the sake of our new overseers, PROC refers to a marine engineering firm whom we regularly work with on our dock and other issues.
Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much the summary.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lyman?
Just a question of timing of payments and amounts of payments.
Yes.
I know you don't have it now,
Right.
but as much lead time as you can give us. The challenge is that the way that warrant was written is we cannot use reserves as a bridge until we borrow. We have to borrow.
Okay.
So that'll take some time. We maybe could get a $100,000 loan out of a bank in a matter of 2 weeks.
I mean, the bottom line is, even if we're moving as fast as we can move, we're talking about approving the thing at the next meeting, right? We would have to vote on it to approve so even when we approve it then, they start work really at the end of September, beginning of October. Anything that comes in, with the lag in payments as it is, we've probably got a month or two we need to deal with in whatever that total cost is before we're into next year.
But you would need a month to put together financing at least.
Well, yeah, so
Can we borrow from reserves next year at all? Never.
No.
It always has to be,
This article, the way it was written, must be borrowed.
Can't use reserves for this.
so we'd have to borrow money to do the design and then borrow money to do the project. Is that what you're saying? Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And
But also, the other thing to think about is, whatever lead time there is to be able to do this. So let's say, I don't know when you'll expect to get a cost for the remaining work for design, so you can put it up for scope of work.
Yeah,
Because they're gonna give you a cost, right?
yes,
Well, once you have that cost, they're gonna say, okay, well, we can't get this done until, let's say it's February. Well, that's fine, but if they want to be paid when their work is done in February, the amount of $10,000, we've got to find that money in order to pay them on time, that's all.
I understand.
And the construction piece is a piece of cake, because that's gonna be late in the year. And by then, we've gone through the larger bond issue, assuming it's gone out to bid and it comes back, because the application for Maine Municipal Bond Bank is February 12th.
Right, and as you pointed out, we still have about 18,000 left in money from reserves this year from last year's.
Well, that's a sort of, because of the Article 18 approved $15,000 for North Street.
Right,
We built that up a little bit to give you some additional funds. Mentally, I'm thinking 10 for North Street and 5 for the project.
Right.
okay,
So that gives you 8,500.
okay.
So you don't really have
Used
all.
this year. That has to be
Now-
used this year, right?
And that has to be used this year. And if North Street only costs you 5,000, well, they won't mind. But at the time, we really didn't know. We thought 10,000 was probably enough.
Right,
Well,
right.
that's fine, if that wood pile stays there, you don't have to use it.
Mike, if there are something you want the overseers, a reminder to vote on at the September meeting, then it'd be great to send something out in advance that they could have a look at,
Right,
if it's applicable.
yes.
Michael?
Just a question, so when do you think in the most macro sense the work will happen?
The goal is for it to start basically sometime after the round Islesboro race next year. I would say somewhere between September 15th and October 15th, the time we have our meeting for closing. That's the goal, is to get it started there, get all of the work done, all the site work graded, and it probably won't be paid till the next year. Okay, which actually, the site guy likes that idea because he'd like it to sell, because they're gonna do a lot of work. They can sell some more, they can regrade it one more final time and then pave. And then we would be done. So for the winter of 2021, we have gravel down there.
Oh, that's okay, so I know that you wanted to hear how it went, and it was wonderful.
And
So we'll talk
the
later.
revetment work in front of the yacht club,
Yes.
does that happen at the same time?
the goal is this is one project,
Yeah, so
to get it all done at once, that's the goal.
There's one, what I'll call a lingering issue. When will we make a decision, or when will you make a decision about what the CribWorks design is going to be? Because I would think we'd want to go forward with a design instead of
Yes.
saying 3.
And that was exactly the question of the engineer who's been saying, when are we getting to one design for almost a year now, right? And, you know, I said, we have done this process, and I feel that where we are in this is that it's getting to the point where we want to get their recommendation of what makes the most sense from a cost and so on, because all of them work, and we're gonna whittle it down, and that's why, oh, I didn't mention this, that's why we're gonna have a monthly newsletter that Amanda Hickman has volunteered to write. It's gonna go to Dan Webster and be sent out with progress and so on.
But what month do you think we'll have that decision?
I think we'll have that probably by the time it's going to hit.
Not, so not till, I don't understand
You're
that.
talking the September meeting.
Yeah, that would,
Because you said, well, go straighten me out.
yeah, the September, the bid time would be, hopefully, we can have it ready to go by February or March at the latest. That would be the goal.
Well, if we go to get the money from the Maine Municipal Bond Bank, we need to have the bid package all together by,
I assume so.
By
I
February.
haven't- yeah.
By
so which
February.
means we have to know what we're bidding on long before that. So,
Which means we have to have a vote to approve by 8
amongst
December.
ourselves.
Yeah.
When?
And we don't meet in December.
Yeah,
So September, October,
It would
November.
have to be the January meeting.
That seems too late to me.
I think, can we have?
I think
And I know that it's hard to pull the plug on one because all of us are going to get backlash. Why not that? Why not that? But I think postponing it is not helpful. I think we need to know by September, October, November
Right, well,
what it is that is going to be the
okay,
best product
yeah, I mean,
for the lowest dollars.
I want to involve everybody on the infrastructure in this, but in the discussions with the engineer, the discussion was basically, right now, we're looking at the vertical wall. If we can't do the revetment in a way that fits well into the causeway, then we can't do that one. So they're gonna look at that, because that's a little bit less costly. So we're looking at that, and then if that doesn't work, it'll be the vertical wall. So they'll decide that
Okay.
through sort of engineering details between 50 and 100%, which makes the most sense. Unless we have a strong opinion that says, no, we absolutely want this.
Okay.
I felt like that wasn't what we were going for. If we are, let me know now, and I'll say, no, it has to be this and that. So if somebody wants to make a motion of what they think it should look like, I'm totally on board
No,
with that.
I think your approach is the right one, where you want to have the confirmation as to the manner in which the two pieces tie together. I just think you need to have that answer from the engineers in September, October, or
Well,
November.
that's going to be one of the first things they do.
I agree 100% with your approach. I was just going to say the same thing, which is, if you could say, you need to tell us what your recommended approach is so we can make a call.
Okay.
And then they can go forward and design in that respect. Right?
Exactly.
I don't want to wait for that until January, February.
Right, no, I was
We
just
never get
saying,
the bid package together before.
Right.
Yeah.
yes, okay.
So are we then, for clarification, because it was raised at the annual meeting, are we, what process is it from here? Is it an overseer's process based on the recommendations of the committee? And are we done with input from the community? Is that it around?
Yeah.
Just want to be clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, well, yes and no. We're done with having meetings and that sort of thing. But all our meetings are open to the public, and anybody can come at any time and voice their concern about.
Yeah, that's good clarity.
Yeah, and that's why the newsletter is going to go out, because it's going to say. if you-
Hey, we're
you know-
meeting and we're talking about X,
Right.
Y, Z.
Exactly, exactly. But you're right. We're moving forward because there's tight, as we talked about, the timing is tight to get it done. But I encourage anybody throughout the winter who has any questions or comments to come to any one of the meetings and talk it through with us.
I think that what I heard at the annual meeting several times was strong support on the part of the residents to trust the overseers to make the right decision. And that they were giving you this money and this responsibility and saying, you guys do the hard work, You figured out, we trust you. And so I agree. It's time for the overseers to make a decision soon, in the next few months, as to which of the 3 approaches they recommend.
Right.
And we'll go with it.
And to keep that trust, we want to be as public as we
Right,
can.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, so in summary, we can't really decide the actual design until they start doing some of the final design detail works. When they get to that, we'll get a memo out to everybody and we'll make that decision. Because I don't even know right now if we still have a recommended design or not based on the way things have gone. And what we'll just do is make a motion that supersedes whatever we did before and go forward, because there was discussion of have we already voted for one versus the other.
Okay.
All that won't matter.
Good. Anything else for Mr. Len? Utilities Committee.
We met on Friday. We have an opening for an overseer that needs to be filled. We're looking at Miles and Lisa to perhaps join that. You don't have to state now that you want to. We would be asking the overseers to appoint an overseer to join that trustees committee in September. If either of you have questions offline as to what that means, Mike and I would be happy to talk with you. I know that Dick Brockway would be happy to give you perspective. Our citizen members are, we twisted Gordon's arm pretty heavily to continue on as one citizen member. So we would be asking that he be reappointed when September comes around. And David Crowfoot has agreed to continue as the chair, and he's the other citizen member. We are very grateful that Dick Brockway has agreed to resume the role of technical advisor. So we will still have the best of all worlds because he will still be there. The system is running beautifully. The superintendent's report is appended to our minutes, so they'll be published as soon as David gets his draft done. We did receive a notice of violation from Denise Baer, who is our DEP contact, and then she modified it. There are more procedural issues than functioning issues, and we're working with that. I think we've already corrected whatever it is that she was concerned about. We have had a very concrete conversation about the billing issues, particularly Miles, you raised this as well. We were mindful that there was some concerns with our billing. We've instructed the superintendent, who is Dick McElhaney, to insist upon the resumption of part of our monthly report being how many people were billed, what was the total billed, how much has been paid, and because we had some mailing issues and some issues that last time around, and we're addressing that. I think that's the full.
Flush, flush, flush.
Oh, and we tend to, yes, flush, flush, flush. We tend to, the reference to flush, flush, flush is when it gets dry, we actually have a possibility of having higher problems with GSS and BOD.
Lots of people, right?
Because we have done such a great job of getting rid of the I&I, which is inflow and infiltration, which dilutes the effluent. So now, because we have such low numbers of I&I, you flush your system more, and we're in really good shape. That part of that is because of this man, part of that is because of a man named Freddie Barton, who, if you ever see him, it's just at 4:30 in the morning going down, and then Dick McElhaney. We tend to meet the Fridays at 2:30 prior to the overseers meetings. The calendar that you just adopted will match that, and that will be one thing for you to consider. It's great fun. It's a lot shorter than these meetings.
Do you likewise not meet in December?
Right, unless we have an issue. The other thing we do is we'll talk offline what we do.
Okay.
Try to move it along.
Anything else for the utility committee? It says David Crowfoot, just also so you understand, David Crowfoot is the chair of that committee and sometimes attends these meetings, but in his absence, Judy makes a report.
And Mike serves on it as well.
Mike serves as the other overseer. Safety committee, Mr. Terrell.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
not to
we
say
met the
my
other day.
tutor volunteer, just because you have
The committee, this is for next year, but we voted to recommend the purchase and installation of dock are safety flags by color indicating conditions at the dock and at the swimming area. So they are, I don't have the code, the safety color code clear in my head, but indicating when it's safe to dive, when it's safe to swim, when it's not safe, there's I think a red one or something. And Bill is looking at the installation of that on the dock in an appropriate place. It's about a $250 expense all in, probably including the whole, I think there's 7 flags, roughly $30 each. So I don't know if we can accommodate that in the current budget on equipment or one of the line items, or if we have to do that separately.
Yeah, and I can't answer today. What I would recommend is as we get out of September, so we have those financials, you know where you stand. I would assume that the reduction in police hours is going to give you some money that you didn't expect to have. And if you do, I'd buy the flags this year.
Yeah, okay.
And we may have money in contingency fund. But that's something. The good news is, once we get through our peak season, we have a pretty clear picture of what we've spent and what remains. And, cross our fingers, if you're lucky, there'll be some money left in the budget to be able to do it sooner or later.
So we'll stay in touch on that.
And you should have it too, because if you remember, Mackenzie was all done as of Saturday.
Yeah.
She's not filling her.
So we're down to one lifeguard for the remaining.
Michael, on that, a question is that, just make sure that part of the program for these flags includes who's responsible for putting them in, who's responsible for taking them out, especially when there's not a lifeguard on that day.
Right.
And what happens when flags are stolen. You may want to buy 2 sets of flags. Because they may well be the sort of thing that people want to walk.
Souvenir.
The souvenir, exactly. So just thinking ahead in terms of that.
Some sickos stealing.
Just
Very dim
Okay.
view of
7 overseers, so all 7 overseers make their own flag.
There's 7 days in a week, each overseer could be
Because I'm
responsible.
throwing clubbers.
And we'll have Sheila Allen teach us how to do it as part of the crafts.
We met with the lifeguards as we're going to institute for next year, a subcommittee of the committee with the lifeguards on a bi-weekly basis to give them input around what we're hearing and to hear their input. This safety flag issue topic was suggested by Ed, the lifeguard. So they are on the eyes and ears of the community. We want to also, because throughout the year, throughout the season particularly, we do hear, I hear from parents and residents who have issues, or hey, what about this and that? So what we want is a regular dialogue. Bill is in dialogue with them regularly, but as their supervisor, but we want to also them to know that the committee is available for feedback as well as giving feedback. So that went well. A couple of things came up that we're going to look at next year. We are going to draft a set of dock rules, the do's and don'ts on the dock, and probably create a sign, a quite large one, and put it down there, because this is what we're hearing from the lifeguards is that some of the basics aren't clear to people. And, so more to come on that. That will be drafted, circulated in the committee, and put before the overseers. And then have a plan for a very prominent sign down there. There are a number of issues with the decking, especially the immediate decking, right? Yeah, right, the immediate decking right as you jump. That it's slippery, and they've had a number of, I think this is why it's great to have this feedback from the lifeguards, because that just kind of came out that several times, in one case, an adult went to jump and lost their footing and toppled over. So so we want to look at that. Bill has some issues around whether it can be, how it can be handled because of the conditions down there, and the paint and the decking material, right, Bill? So we have to look at that to make it more secure. A couple other things. Always worried about next year, getting the right, having the people, having lifeguards in place. So don't know about Evan. assuming Evan's coming back, we don't know yet, but Mackenzie may not come back because she may have, she's a nursing student and she may have an internship or a job for the summer. She wants to come back, but she'll let us know as the winter gets underway. You know, it's really hard to hire. It's very hard to hire, so we're concerned about that. Police car, you've heard about, and parking, we talked about too. I think that's it. Does anyone have any other?
I would just like to put it on the record that once again, we are blessed to have Evan and Mackenzie as our lifeguards. They have been spectacular, and we are so fortunate to have them. And I completely understand as they get older that this may not be a situation they can always return to, but they have been great out there. I've gone on many times when they've just been an eye on everything that happens over there. So I'm very happy to be that.
Yeah,
I'm sure everything is.
absolutely. And then, I guess, sorry, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that about the police officers. I really enjoyed the time sharing this year. I liked the fact that it was 2 different personalities and 2 different types of people that people could talk to. And they both approached it a little bit differently, but they were very professional. So I really liked that. So if we could do that again when we have this
The assumption
sharing.
is, yeah, the assumption is we're going to.
Yeah.
I think it's also great that we're starting to ask them, because for instance, this spike issue isn't just about the current, but also, jellyfish have been here the last 2 years, so there'll be a flag addressing the jellyfish. So I think it's good, because things do change, things are changing down there, and so having their input is very good. It's something we would not have thought about.
Yeah, I mean, the safety, one flag was for water
Sea,
conditions and one is for sea life.
Yeah.
I mean, they're quite, I think there's a clear flag that indicates enemy submarines.
Terrorist threat.
More to come on that. I guess 2 other issues. I get asked regularly about, and it came up as I was leaving the annual meeting, those mechanical speed signs. We know they're costly, we have one of them, but many, the question is asked, can we have more of them? So we know we don't because of the cost, and we make choices around that, but I just put it out there that something.
$2,500.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Again, it comes back to, if we near year end, we may find out that there's money in the budget you could use for that, if the overseers choose to do so. The other option is to just put a note out to see if people have to make donations. But I'll tell you what, I think that's.
Well,
I'm in. I don't know what else to
Yeah,
tell you.
and I would
It
think
works for
some
me.
kind of fundraiser or something, I would be more than happy to help. I think other people in the community would do that if people are open to that, if we're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Because I will say, I should see when the police stopped, I felt like with the police there and really, we're on George Street. Once they got it down, the speed was going down. Once the car went away, I can absolutely see a difference. And so if there's some way we can help out with that, I would be more than
Oh,
happy to help
and
with
this is
that.
the part of the meeting that we turn to the camera and run a telethon. Okay, so that, and the other issue is that, and I think it will come up under Northport, sign posting of speed limits. And that's, Bill, I wanted to speak to that quickly because it's,
Yeah,
you went to the meeting.
Vicky didn't go. So we had some people come to the safety committee about speed limit signs and things, especially on the shore road. So that Monday night, I went to the meeting and I request again, like I've requested quite a few times, asked the town about adding a few more speed limit signs in the village on the shore road area that this person was bringing up the issue on. They basically listened to what I had to say, because John Spritz, when I showed up, he happened to be there, which I was happy to see him there too. They looked at me, didn't really say much. They didn't say whether they was going to or they weren't going to. They did ask about our police officers, and we did tell them that we had a problem with the transmission. And that's kind of how they left it. They didn't really say one way or the
Yes,
other.
they did not, they were non-committal, let us say.
Well,
And Shore Road is you recognize that Shore Road, of course, is a town road and not a village road, so.
Yeah, and I might recommend, or you might recommend, that if a resident does come with that you recommend that they go to the town. It might.
We did that.
We did that.
Okay,
Went
great.
over
They were not there at the meeting.
Yeah, it went over like the proverbial.
Let, Mike?
One thing with respect to signs, I was talking to Mr. Boucher, Officer Boucher, and he and I talked about the roads that we own, that we do not necessarily have to put speed limit signs. We don't have to put the stop signs that we were talking about. So he said we could actually put signs that don't meet the code, okay, because they're not required by law to be there. So we could put in smaller signs or things that are less intrusive, smaller stop signs and so on, because those are the roads that we maintain. Because by law, you have to stop at Main Street, or at George Street because of the intersection thing. You don't have to have, he explained it, again, I can get into that. So I'm just saying that's something to consider,
Okay.
is we can save some money there, and also that we're not as intrusive.
Got it.
And then the last thing is about back to these rules. Lisa had a recommendation in the committee, this too, is draft the rules and get them out to all residents, including all renters through the rental.
Just hang them on the refrigerator.
All right.
Okay.
Good. Waterfront Safety Committee, Mr. Wilt.
No report. The committee is going to reconvene this fall to look at what we've learned this summer. Things seem to have gone pretty well. But we'll reconvene in the fall and we'll come back with recommendations.
Thank you. Town of Northport, Vicki, anything particular to know?
No.
Vicki's our liaison to the town of Northport. Bill?
So the only other issue that I dealt with at the same time was the town administrator had contacted me about an issue with the recyclables being dirty. A lot of stuff going in the recycle bags that do not belong in the recycle bags. The town of Northport is having an issue because their contracts changed. And their recycling bin now is smaller than it used to be, and it also has to incorporate now the two other big recycling bins they had for cardboard. So that's going into the smaller bin. Our issue on our end with our contractor, okay, not per se with the dirtiness in the thing, because it's hard to know whether somebody's thrown lobster shells in the bag or not, is it's full. What do? They got this stuff on their truck. What do? So they worked something out with the tenant down there, and he says, well, just stack it over here. You know, if you have bags that you can't get in there, stack it over here. So we had this discussion back and forth. I give them a little bit of education of back when I used to do it, and how things were set up when the Page family used to do the trash or whatever. The town had set aside at the end of their dumpsters a bigger dumpster that was set aside because we would run into that then, that even the trash would be full, and you'd have 2 more loads of trash to get rid of and no place to put it. So they set up a dumpster at the end that was basically set aside for the village for overflow. We kind of discussed that a little bit about trying to do that with the recycling. You know, if you come in and you can't get the recycling bags in, then you're gonna have to throw them in that dumpster. Yeah, it's not gonna get recycled, you know, but the only other issue, back and forth, they wanted us to come in on a Tuesday instead of a Monday. I said, if we do that, then that's gonna create this problem that we've had in the past when we've tried that. Trash is gonna be strewed all over the village because people leave to go home on the off seasons on Sundays. So they put their trash out, this and that. So then they suggested that maybe the village come up with a dumpster for their overflow.
Vicki?
I'm surprised to hear this because I spoke to Marnie, and her last name doesn't come to me right now, who was working with the town of Northport, as, you know, when they were trying to come up with a new recycler and things like that. And I had asked her how it was going, and she said she hadn't heard any problems. So obviously I wasn't talking to the right person. So I am sort of the village liaison, but I say sort of, you know, and I've asked several times to be put on the list for their agenda, and it's really not happening regularly, and I've lost track of when the meetings are. And I will say that when I did get involved and when they were coming up with a recycling contract, Marty and I got together about what communication to send to people. Ultimately, for her committee, it was too late to do anything. So I will mention to her again, find out who that person is, and I sincerely believe it's education, because I put together this one sign, and it was, when in doubt, throw it out. Don't recycle it, okay? That's how you get clean recycling. So everybody's good intentions as far as recycling. So just say that we will revisit that, and okay, you and I will talk.
That's the way we left it.
Judy?
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on your comment about perhaps getting a dedicated dumpster. What I would love you to be able to report to us next month what the cost of that will be
Okay.
and how they would propose it being only, you know.
And they are working on, matter of fact, they've got another recycling dumpster ordered,
Okay.
but to get it built and that, it's just gonna get here at the off-season.
So
They
this-
overlooked, I was under the misconception, even way back when we were going to the meetings down there, I was under the misconception too. I thought it was the whole trash contract, and it was not. All the regular trash is still by Costello.
Oh, so it was
It's
just
the
the
recycling
Casella, yeah.
and the demolition debris and that stuff that was in the contract.
And any word on whether the brush pile will be reopened up?
They didn't say, they said, well, they had just passed their inspection from the state, and where Northport is one of the third or fourth cleanliest ones in the state. But they don't have brush and that stuff.
The answer is it's not going to happen. Because of the state requirements for testing of the piles and turning in the piles, that they don't want to spend the money.
This may not be as big an issue as it seems, by the way, since they are getting a new dumpster and we're moving into the off-season. It's a couple of months of the year when this is an issue.
See how it goes.
Another opportunity, anything else that, in terms of Northport issues? Another opportunity for meeting attendees, if they want to address anything that's been discussed at our meeting?
Can I say something really quick?
Absolutely.
I just want to really thank our police department. They have been incredible, spending their personal time to help me through the issues that you guys have an incredible police department.
Oh, that's good to know.
Absolutely. I mean, I
They
really
are
want to publicly thank them for that.
You're right. New and continuing business. There was an item that somehow made it to my agenda, not to yours and others, to renew contracts for trash pickup and parks maintenance.
Yeah, those both expire in September,
What do you think? You need a bid on it?
which should be approved today.
Yeah.
And should, well, the documentation should go out today, and should be approved at the next meeting.
Yeah, so both did you say both the trash and the Van Basil? Or Barb, whoever it is wearing the hat at any given time? I move that the village agent be instructed to post a public bid opportunity for a 3-year contract for trash and recyclable street side pickup.
One or second? Wait a second.
Well, we can go to discussion.
Okay. Second by Jeffrey. Discussion?
One thing that came from our trash hauler at this point, because the town was after him on some other issues surrounding him using the dump and bringing in Northport trash. So anyway, he came back to me after they had discussed something with him, and he says, with the village, when they renew their contract, would the village want me to give them a price for me to not even go to their transfer station and handle the trash?
Where would
I
he
think
put it?
that, well, he has to take it to the appropriate places per,
Like to Casella?
yeah,
Okay.
those places. But I'm just gonna tell you, it's gonna be a lot more money.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, I was like, definitely, no, I don't want to propose that he drive it to Hampton.
They allow a contractor to come in just because it's money that's generated out of our curbside taxes and
Right,
stuff.
exactly.
So he's allowed to go in there. Well, he's kind of been slapped a few times because,
So we'll consider, tell him that we will consider that if he does submit a bid. We won't consider the go elsewhere. We'll consider his performance behavior vis-à-vis the relationship with Northport, and he ought to put in his in his bid package, if he wants the job, that he'll follow the rules.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the challenge is, when you guys do that contract,
Mandy?
Yes.
when you guys do that contract, you need to make sure a copy goes to Judy and a copy goes to me so we can proof it.
Mhm.
That should happen probably in the next couple, 3 days,
Yeah.
so you're gonna get it posted, you know.
You need to turn that around in the, it would be wonderful if we did it in Republic. Do we do it in Republic?
We usually do it in the journal because we didn't want to go out to the big wide web because you're going to get the big dumpster trucks.
Right. So just so that the overseers understand, so that'll be something that you'll be voting on then. You'll be opening bids and voting on and agreeing to at the September meeting. We intend to get this out quickly. And then we have the other contract, which is parks maintenance. Oh, sorry, there was a motion. Any further discussion? So all in favor of the motion to put out the contract? That's unanimous. Parks maintenance, ditto.
Yeah, thank you. So that's Vicki's motion.
I make a motion, yeah, we put out a contract for parks and
A 3-year contract as before?
It's 3, and we always have a conversation as to the spring and fall cleanup. Is this going to include the mowing and spring and fall cleanup?
Yes.
I think
Okay,
we
so it's
cleaned
1
that
for the 3.
The last go round, I think we finally got that. nailed
Clean
down.
that up. One other issue that I would like to ask is some of these other little things that we have to have them come and do, like, I think last meeting Terrell wanted the sand cleaned up down there because of, safety, and we had 3 other spots that way, and I said, as soon as it's rained, it's gonna be back. Well, it was done, but now it's right back, so you wouldn't know it was done.
Yeah.
They come in and do that. Do we want to tie something similar into that, or do we want to keep doing it the way we're doing it, and separate it out?
It's a really good question, and I'm not sure we have the time to finesse the
Probably
bid
don't.
package.
Probably don't.
But if we're going to get it out in time.
Probably don't. Probably ought to stay with the regular pack.
So when they come in and do these other little things, do they send you a separate bill? Oh, I
And
think
it's
that's
on
fine.
their base,
I
their
think-
base hourly rate.
Yeah, and you determine, because a tree fell down on somebody's yard. We didn't need an arborist in there, ching, 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 and Bill just asked them. I mean, any of us could have gone out there with a chainsaw or something. And so, yeah, I think you have the discretion to determine what.
I was just wondering if it was trying to-
So there was a motion by Vicki. I'm not sure who the second was, if there was a second on that yet.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jeffrey, because we've had discussion in advance of that. Any further discussion on the 3-year bid for parks maintenance contract? Hearing none, all in favor? That's unanimous, thank you.
Thanks
So
for catching that.
likewise, both of those have to kind of pronto be put together and gotten, okay?
I'm gonna circulate these, I promised a copy of sort of some recommendations on the transition. Not for a review now, you can take it with you, and when you're having trouble sleeping, just grab that.
Thank you.
Um,
Maybe I'll be treasurer.
So I move that we go into executive session.
I have one more.
Is there any other new, any other?
I was
Yes.
going to give an update on the meeting with the DEP.
Oh, please do. I really want that update. And I'll just mention, by the way, that the sounds we're hearing of noise upstairs is because people are bringing the food for the food pantry. So if you have anything, we'll go after me. Yes, Mike, please give us an update on that.
Yeah, so I attended the meeting last week. It was the initial hearing. I sent around the final results of that. Essentially, the committee set, the number of interveners is set, and now the next item will be on October 23rd. There will be a site visit, and they've asked for, what areas people want to see, and I was going to say, we want them to see our village. We want them to go out on our wharf and look out and see how close it is. We want them to go to Little River and look out and see kind of both ways. So I was going to recommend that.
Oh, excellent recommendation.
Okay, and I would suggest that we have the president available if possible on the 23rd. You know, it should be the intervener, and I was gonna recommend that I was the primary contact and you were the secondary, so that, and
When-
anybody can go to any of these meetings and represent us.
What day of the week is that, do you happen to know?
I don't know, it's October 23rd.
So you'll just give me the info on that. I agree with you, I think the president should be there.
Yeah, I think as many of us who can be there as possible. I think particularly as we were all engaging with our neighbors and friends more and more in the last couple of weeks, if I were doing an informal poll, I would be saying that there's not a lot of enthusiasm among the residents here for that fish farm. So I think we need to have some show of force. It is a Wednesday. And what time is it, do you know?
They haven't said that yet. They just picked a date. Now, then, there was a lot of discussion about timing and how this was gonna go forward, and the folks for DEP gave their updates, and as you can imagine, there weren't a lot of dates mentioned in their updates, so people sort of primed them a little bit afterwards. How do we set up, what's the schedule gonna be like? And basically, the only thing that's known for sure is they won't have any meetings before this site visit. They like to do the site visit. They have a lot of work still to do reviewing the permits internally. Any questions that we have for them should be submitted now in writing to the different permittees, and then they will decide whether they're going to go back and ask for more information. So it's still in the information gathering and review stages. I do have to get back to them by Monday to say that the primary contact, it was going to be me with Judy, and we're going to put our two emails as well as the village, number, so that that's always on there. So that's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah, I like.
Okay, and then the only last thing is in the next month or so, there was no real deadline. They won't go over every issue in every permit, is what they said, but they will go over issues that are important to the interveners and to the permittees and so on. So you and I had a conversation at the pancake breakfast about, what are the issues that are concerned of the village. And I have a short list here, okay, that we talked about. And then if we have other things that are concerned, we can bring those up, but we can't talk about everything. So I had said, obviously, the groundwater and saltwater infiltration of the wells of people in Bayside. The water quality is obviously our concern. Items that could affect property value. So that is more like things that could actually, if it really stinks or it's really loud and everybody says, well, if that's the case, then there must be pollution type of thing. So that was the other one. And then there was a traffic discussion at that meeting that you brought up. And then also our water. And I'm not sure how much that, we want to make sure we still get our water from Belfast. I don't know how much that is a concern or is not a concern, but that's one. So those were what I thought our list was. And if you guys have any ideas of other things that should be on this, just let me know.
So that's 4 things? Did you say 4 things?
Well, I said a few things. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 6.
What was the first one?
Groundwater infiltration of people's well, the saltwater infiltration in groundwater well, and using groundwater.
Go ahead.
I would just reorient the priorities, because I think the integrity of the bay water is one of the things that I hear most. And as you know from the permitting work you do in your profession, Mike, the possible reduction of fair market value of property around the project is never something that is going to impress a permitting authority, so we should not make that high. They don't really care if it otherwise meets the standards.
Right.
So it is whether or not, for me, our wastewater treatment plant is going to be undermined, and the quality of our bay is going to be undermined.
Yes. I agree. I mentioned that because that's what people have said to me.
Right.
Was that they were worried about the property values. And so I'm only thinking of that in the sense of what are the issues that we would need to address that could be perception issues about property values. That's what, yeah. Okay?
Thank you very much for saying.
Well, it has to do with the integrity of the bay, but I say just loss of the ability to enjoy the natural resources there recreationally, because that is a huge recreational area.
So, and again, you're getting back to water quality. So that's, so water quality is probably number 1, 2, and 3.
I think so.
And everything else is 4.
Steve,
No, it's just,
you had your hand up.
no.
Anything else? Then I heard a motion to go to executive session.
Who motion to go into executive session?
I did.
Judy, seconded by
Vicky.
Vicky.
Do you want me to stay? Because typically I don't.
Yes.
Yes, please. But can I just, I also was asked to volunteer at 10, so I just want to make, I can tell they have enough people, but I just want to say I'm very pleasant.
What the hell time is it, all right?
I got it. Oh, not bad for this one.